The sea was merciless that night. Waves crashed against the cliffs as if trying to swallow the world whole, and above the roar of the storm, a single question cut through the darkness. Do you want the truth? Rosen stood at the edge of it all, wind tearing through her golden hair. Will you trust me no matter what I say? She asked softly. In front of her, he watched in silence, tall, unshaken, dressed in authority and restraint. Then he answered, It doesn't matter, and Rosen knew better than anyone how dangerous trust could be. The deeper it grew, the sharper it stabbed when broken. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. So just tell me, Rosen, if it truly didn't matter to him. Then she would tell him the truth. Are you a good liar? The man sitting across from Rosen asked calmly. Rosen leaned back in the interrogation chair, chains clinking softly at her wrists. Outside the narrow window, dark clouds loomed heavily as the Vaiheth cut through the restless sea, bound for the Isle of Monte. Not at all, she replied nonchalantly. I've never told a lie. Not once. The man's pen scratched steadily against the paper. But your file says otherwise, he said, lifting his gaze. And I've never told a lie is the exact sentence you repeatedly stated in court. Rosen leaned forward irritably, metal scraping against metal. That damn judge wouldn't listen to me. He didn't react, he simply wrote it down. What is your name? She smirked. Why are you asking that? Unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows my name. It's protocol, he said sharply. Just state your name. Rosen Walker. He didn't look convinced. That's not what we have in the file. But that is my real name, she replied, shrugging. He leaned back slightly. I don't care about that. I'm asking you to confirm the name written here. Her brow furrowed faintly. For a second, the confidence slipped. Rosenhauers, she muttered. He nodded once and continued reading. You were sentenced to 50 years at the age of 17. Imprisoned in Perrine Female Penitentiary. 1 year later, you escaped. According to this, you crawled down a cliff and climbed Dobe Mountain with your bare hands. Rosen listened patiently. You were arrested again 3 months later in St. Vin, after hiding. An additional 25 years were added to your sentence. You were transferred to Alcapez, a maximum security prison. His eyes lifted briefly to meet hers. 5 years later, you escaped again. You evaded the Imperial Army for an entire year. It also states you escaped using nothing but a spoon. He paused. Is all of this true? Rosen smiled wider. Of course it's true, and you wouldn't believe what I had to go through to get that spoon. The amount of time I had to tolerate that disgusting prison guard. He raised his hand with a quiet sigh. I don't need the details, just answer the question. She nodded lightly. Yes, it's all true. Then she lifted her gaze fully to meet his. Her smile faded. The man sitting in front of her was the famous war hero, Ian Connor. There wasn't a single person who hadn't seen his face during the war. Every time aircraft flew overhead, flyers bearing his image would rain down from the sky. When his voice echoed through battlefield broadcasts, everyone would look up, mesmerized. The government knew exactly how to fool people. A handsome young pilot was the perfect medium for propaganda, and in the middle of the chaos of war, they too had needed Ian Connor. And what was your crime? Ian asked suddenly. Rosen blinked, pulled out of her daze. What? I'm asking, he clarified evenly. What was your crime? What got you imprisoned in the first place? I didn't do it. Ian's gaze hardened slightly. As per protocol, just answer what I asked. Insisting you're innocent doesn't change the guilty verdict. Rosen glared at him. Nor does it change the truth that I am innocent. Before they could argue further, the door burst open. Commander, what are you doing? A young man hurried inside, breathing unevenly. Then he sighed. I know you're a stickler for rules, but there's no need for this. Prisoners being sent to the Isle of Monte are the worst of the worst, and... He paused, turning to point directly at Rosen. It's the Witch of Alcapez. You must not let your guard down. She escaped twice. I saw her file. She was just 17 when she murdered her husband, Hindley Howers. Both men looked at Rosen. She nodded slowly. Stabbed him 36 times, she said calmly. They called it a crime of passion, said it came from deep resentment. Her voice wavered. But it wasn't me. I loved my husband. I was a good wife. It must have been some burglar. There were so many people jealous of Hindley. They didn't even carry out a proper investigation. They didn't listen to a word I said. They just threw me into prison. She began sobbing softly. Ian looked at her without emotion. Enough with the act. It doesn't matter what kind of wife you were. You were found guilty. That's final. The sobbing stopped instantly. Rosen sighed inwardly. That didn't work. Maybe because she looked a mess right now. Ian stood up. Nobody believed you were capable of escaping. Yet you did. So what's the difference? Just because you're small doesn't mean you couldn't have done it. All evidence points to you. It's clear you're lying. He stepped forward. Henry, bring her. Henry grabbed her arm and followed Ian out of the room. To Rosen, they were gentle compared to the guards she had faced before. But regardless of who was guard and who was prisoner, it was always a cat-and-mouse relationship. The moment one let their guard down, the other would strike. And Rosen was an expert at seizing opportunities. Her eyes drifted to Ian, more precisely, to his waist. A key hung there, the key to her escape, and she was confident that this time, too, she would triumph. Has the ball ended? Ian asked as they walked down the corridor. Henry let out a long sigh. Of course. We couldn't possibly let the guests see the witch. Not everyone is as fearless as you, Commander. Many things had changed after the war. The Vyheth, once a military supply ship filled with smoke, gunfire, and wounded soldiers, had been transformed into a passenger steamer. Where there had once been blood and chaos, there were now chandeliers, music, and elegant dances. And its destination, newly redecorated and advertised, was the Isle of Monte. It was almost comical. The prisoner being sent to that infamous island was sharing the same ship with the wealthy elite, who treated the gruesome place like a tourist attraction. Ian led them outside. The wind blew gently, the sea shimmering under the moonlight. The night was beautiful, especially for someone being sent to the Isle of Monte for life. You dug the tunnel out of Alcapez and crawled through it with your bare hands, correct? Ian asked. Rosen turned to him. Yes. But why are you asking that again? She said, confused. He studied her profile. People say you used magic. Is that true? Rosen understood immediately where that rumor had come from. The last person who had escaped Alcapez before her was a witch, and that was 36 years ago. So when the media learned about Rosen's escape, they reached the simplest conclusion. She must be a witch too. After all, people are always afraid of what they cannot understand. Even in an era where magic was suppressed and science was revered, traces of the old world still lingered. Witches had diminished in number. They had hidden themselves, carefully, where they could not be seen. But that did not mean they had completely disappeared. Do you really think I would have ended up like this if I were a witch? Rosen snapped. Getting caught again after escaping? Letting you put handcuffs on me? Henry scoffed loudly. Don't let her fool you, Commander. We just saw her act. She can deceive anyone. Rosen's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice dropped to a whisper. Consider yourself lucky. If I were a witch, I would have sewn your mouth shut first. Henry stiffened. She turned back to Ian. In fact, I passed the magic stone test. What more proof do you need? Or do you have so little faith in your own army? Henry's temper flared instantly, but Ian's voice cut through the tension. Henry, hands off. His tone was firm. Or I will report you to higher command. Now bring what I asked for. Henry hesitated, then walked off reluctantly. Ian faced her again. Rosen Howers, he began evenly, you are the most notorious prison escapee in the Empire. I don't care whether you're lying or whether you're a witch. I'm simply informing you of a few facts. She watched him carefully. First, you are convicted. That verdict is final. You are sentenced to life on the Isle of Monte. Second, I was ordered to personally transfer you there. He paused. Third, there have been prisoners who escaped from Alcapez in the past, but no one has ever escaped from the Isle of Monte. It's impossible. His gaze sharpened. Even for a witch. Rosen froze. It was meant to crush her, spirit. But her eyes drifted again, briefly, to the keys at his waist. Those keys were for her handcuffs, or perhaps for the lifeboats. Either way, if she was going to escape, it had to be before they reached the Isle. Henry returned, carrying what Ian had requested. Meat. Rosen's eyes flickered with confusion. What was he planning? Ian took the meat and stepped toward the railing. Watch carefully, he said calmly. See what the ocean can do. He threw the meat into the dark water. In an instant, the surface erupted. Whales surged violently, tearing into it with terrifying force. Henry smiled coldly. See, witch? Watch what those creatures can do. Rosen's face paled. She had to think. Quickly. Anything. Ian removed his keys deliberately and stepped closer to her. Taking a lifeboat might seem like a good option, he said quietly. I noticed you eyeing these, but I hope you've come to your senses now, Rosen Howers. In that moment, Rosen realized something. Ian Connor was no gentleman. Whatever image the flyers had painted, whatever heroic voice had echoed through the skies, that man did not stand before her. To the people, he was a hero. To her, he was no different from all the guards she had encountered before, and she should have known better. With that, Rosen was escorted back to the lower prison quarters of the ship. Hey, Maria's voice rang out the moment she stepped inside the cell. Are you really not going to tell me? You met Ian Connor, right? Rosen shot her a straight look. What are you getting at, Maria? Maria raised an eyebrow, a teasing grin spreading across her face. What do you think I'm talking about? A young and pretty prisoner? And a handsome commander? Oh, come on, Maria, Rosen sighed. Ian Connor, of all people, won't be desperate enough to touch a woman. And a prisoner at that. Maria chuckled. But that worked for you in Alcapez, so why not try flirting with him? Rosen's expression turned serious. She lowered her voice. It's not that simple. The sea is filled with monsters. Maria grabbed her shoulder firmly. Hey, you're not giving up, are you? She asked, her tone suddenly sharp. Rosen met her gaze. She had first met Maria in Alcapez. And if anyone deserved to be called the Witch of Alcapez, it wasn't Rosen. It was Maria. The guards ruled the prison from the outside. Inside, Maria was queen. Anyone who dared upset her soon turned into a corpse. When Rosen had first been transferred there, she was already infamous because of her first escape. Perhaps that was why Maria had taken a liking to her. Because of that, Rosen's days in Alcapez had been far easier than they should have been. She hadn't understood at first why the other inmates treated her with such strange respect. Now she did. They all wanted her to win. They all placed their faith in her. They idolized her, believing she could humiliate the Imperial Army and escape once again. You know me, Maria, Rosen finally replied. I never give up. Maria grinned. That's my girl. She offered her a cigarette. As Rosen held it between her fingers, her thoughts drifted. Ian Connor. He used to be a pilot, she murmured. Why did he leave the Air Force and come here? Maria shrugged lazily. No idea. We just need to work on seducing him so we can get out of here. Rosen shook her head slightly. That only worked on foolish men. Ian Connor was not one of them. And besides, she was completely out of ideas. Even if she managed to steal the key and reach a lifeboat, would she survive those creatures in the sea? Obviously not. And even if by some miracle she did, she would die of thirst and hunger before reaching land. As her mind spiraled with thoughts, she heard a soft sound outside the prison room. She looked out. A little girl was playing with a ball. Rosen frowned. What was a child doing near this area? Concerned, she called out gently. Hey, you shouldn't be here. Go back to your parents. The little girl turned, and instead of leaving, she walked closer. Hello, she said brightly. My name is Lila Reville. Reville? Rosen's eyes widened slightly. Do you happen to know Henry Reville? The girl nodded happily. Yes, he's my uncle. Rosen scoffed under her breath. That foolish man let this child wander here? You shouldn't be here, Rosen repeated softly. This isn't a place for children. The girl's eyes immediately filled with tears. But I already told all my friends that I'd get to meet Rosen Walker, the famous escapee in the land. All the grown-ups said she was on this boat. Rosen Walker, Rosen murmured in surprise. The girl smiled again, her tears gone just as quickly. Yes, my grandpa is the captain of this ship, so I told everyone I'd meet Rosen. But nobody believed me. For a moment, Rosen simply stared at her. Then she smiled faintly. Well then, she said softly, it's your lucky day, Lila. Because I am Rosen Walker. Above deck, the night felt lighter. Henry was still complaining, while Ian leaned casually against the railing, laughing softly. You're overthinking this, Ian said. Take it as a vacation. Enjoy the scenery for once. Henry exhaled sharply. About that woman, Ian glanced at him. She's also from Ryerton, Henry continued. It says she was living outside the city when she committed the crime. Ian's expression shifted slightly. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine, Henry said quickly. I'm just saying, she's from Ryerton too. That's why I mentioned it. I thought maybe that's the reason you're paying her extra attention, Henry explained. Ian didn't answer immediately. Ryerton, their home, the city where they had grown up, where they had attended the military academy, where they had flown their first planes. Ryerton, the city that had later been reduced to rubble under relentless air raids during the war. I know, Ian finally said quietly. Of course you know. I gave you the file, Henry muttered. Still, it's annoying how lucky she is. She escaped when the city was being bombed, and now she's being escorted to the Isle of Monte by Sir Ian Connor himself. Ian looked at him calmly. Yes, he said. But don't forget, it's the Isle of Monte. Henry nodded. I know, but still, at least she's alive. Whether it's the Isle of Monte or anywhere else. Memories crept in, uninvited and sharp, him running, calling their names, crying as smoke swallowed the streets. And when the chaos settled, all he found was a single locket stained with blood. Inside it, a broken image of a mother and child. Below deck, Lila beamed the moment Rosen confirmed who she was. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. But, can you really use magic? Lila asked eagerly. Rosen paused. Then she smiled gently. Lila, will you answer a few questions for me first? Then I'll show you some magic. The little girl fidgeted, but Grandpa said never to do favors for prisoners. It's nothing serious, Rosen assured her softly. I'm just curious about something. Lila hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Do you know a man named Ian Connor? Rosen asked. Lila's face lit up. Yes, he's my uncle's friend, and the best pilot in the world. Are you close to him? Rosen asked. Lila tilted her head. Not really. He's a little scary. But Uncle says he loves me very much, he just doesn't show it. And he's my uncle too, I think. I'm not really sure. Rosen absorbed that quietly. Is he married? She asked casually. Or does he have a girlfriend? No, Lila replied confidently. He's not married. All the other uncles keep telling him to get married, but I don't think he wants to. Have you ever seen him with any ladies? No. Why? Lila asked curiously. Rosen hesitated. What she wanted to ask next was harder to phrase. Lila, have you ever seen Ian being compassionate? What does that mean? Lila blinked. From behind the bars, Maria chimed in lazily. Compassion means feeling sorry for someone, like letting a drenched puppy into your house, that kind of thing. Oh, Lila brightened. You mean love? Rosen gave a small, careful smile. Yes, exactly that. Lila thought for a moment, her brows furrowing in concentration. I don't think he's full of love like that, she answered honestly. But he's a good person. He's a hero, you know. Rosen laughed softly at the child's innocence. Yes, thank you, Lila. Then she leaned closer to the bars. Now, let me show you some magic. Do you have something you can give me? Oh, I have a coin, Lila said excitedly, handing it to her. But what are you going to do with it? I don't know, Rosen said lightly. When it comes to magic, you always need a medium. With a swift flick of her fingers, the coin disappeared from her palm. Lila gasped. It disappeared! Rosen smiled and smoothly slipped the coin out from behind her fingers, holding it up again. It didn't disappear, she said gently. Here. Take it. Back. It's your lucky coin. Lila clutched it tightly. And here's the secret, Rosen whispered. At sundown the coin will turn into gold. But you must not tell anyone, okay? That will break the spell. Lila nodded enthusiastically, eyes shining with excitement. Then she ran off happily. Maria's voice drifted from behind. Was that really magic? Nope, Rosen replied, waving her hand dismissively. Just a simple trick, she'll realize it soon enough. Maria gave her a look. I thought you don't lie. You always say that. Do I? Rosen asked calmly. Yes. You said if you were a witch, you wouldn't be here. Rosen lay down on the floor. But where could I possibly go? She murmured. Even if I jumped from here in the middle of the ocean? Maria paused, lowering her voice. Hey, she said quietly. Even if you can't make it all the way to land with a lifeboat, there's somewhere else you could go. They say there's a place where witches hide. No one knows if it truly exists. She was talking about the Witches' Island, Valpurgis. You've heard of it, right? Maria asked. They say it isn't far from the Isle of Monte. Rosen knew the rumors. They called it the Witches' Island for a reason. Not everyone could go there. Maria said it half-jokingly anyway, then smirked. Still, forget about fairy tales. Focus on deceiving that Commander Ian Connor. Rosen looked down thoughtfully. It wasn't easy. Using a war hero's pity sounded tempting, but the old tactics she once relied on would not work on Ian Connor. He was someone who had always been on the winning side of history, a hero, a man accustomed to triumph. So she would have to offer him another kind of triumph, not love. Tempting him with that would be easier than love. Above deck, Ian stood with Henry. He remembered the advice he had once received about Henry. If he needs to vent, let him speak, don't interrupt. So Ian remained silent. Henry's frustration shifted again as they walked. They want to make you suffer, Henry, muttered bitterly. They want to put blame on you for failing to protect Riordan. That's why they sent you here. They want you to drag down Riordan's witch with your own hands. Ian didn't respond. Everyone resents her, Henry continued. She's the only one who survived. If you personally escort her to the Isle of Monte, they'll praise you all over again. He sighed. Once this is over, you should live your life. You've got nothing but a glorious future ahead. Ian's gaze drifted to the dark horizon. A glorious future? When the war ended, he had marched beneath the Arch of Triumph. Crowds had chanted his name. Flowers had rained down around him. Had it made him happy? Had he ever felt proud? He couldn't remember. You can't protect everyone, Henry said firmly. There's no such thing as a perfect victory. You're not a god. And forget about Rosen Walker. I'll handle her. No, Ian replied quietly. I'll take care of it myself. You focus on getting better. They parted. Ian returned to his quarters and sat down. Henry's words lingered. It wasn't your fault. Those airborne missions had barely made sense. If it hadn't been for Ian, they might have failed entirely. But then, who was responsible? If he wasn't at fault for the deaths, then who was? The order echoed in his mind. Transfer the prisoners to the Isle of Monte. Pay special attention to Rosen Howers. Rosen Howers, prison escapee, born and raised in Riordan, the sole survivor of the bombing. She was alive. And he... Before his thoughts could go further, a voice broke through. Hey! He looked up. What do you want? Rosen demanded sharply. Why did you call me here? Are you even listening? Ian blinked out of his thoughts and closed the file in front of him. Right, he said evenly. Let's continue. He began repeating the regulations again. Why she was not allowed to leave the ship, why escape was impossible, why the lifeboats were guarded. Rosen's temper snapped. She swept the papers off his desk in one sharp motion. They're enough, she snapped. I get it. You don't have to repeat it. I'd be a complete idiot to even think about escaping. Do you think I'm stupid? Ian let out a slow breath. There isn't much difference between a hero and an idiot, he replied calmly. Neither lacks courage. Even you are considered an anti-hero by some. His gaze sharpened. But to me, you became an idiot the moment you chose to run. Rosen scoffed. So what? You think I should have quietly served 50 years? She leaned forward. Tell me then, hero, what should I have done? She had learned something about this man. He reacted more when she provoked him, when she spoke boldly, than when she cried and acted weak. You should have admitted to your crime, Ian answered. You would have received a reduced sentence. You might have been transferred to a lower security prison. Rosen laughed bitterly. Then I would have been in Riordan when it happened, she shot back. And I'd be dead. Her voice hardened. And I still don't understand. I didn't kill him. And even if I did, why 50 years? That's the maximum sentence for murder. Ian pointed at the document. It's written in the legislation, but... He stood up. Being sentenced to life and sent to the Isle of Monte. That was your own doing. With that, he turned toward the door. Rosen's heart skipped. If he left now, she would be back to square one. Worse, she might not get another chance. Anything would do. Even nonsense. Then what's the difference between you and me? She called out quickly. Ian paused. You said heroes and idiots are the same, she continued. Then you're an idiot too. Nobody believed we'd win the war, she went on. We're an empire in name, but we're small and weak. We fought a country that brought nations to their knees, and we won. Her voice sharpened, but only in name. What did we gain from it? Ian's fist tightened at his side. The people are broken. The land is ruined, Rosen continued, stepping closer. And you, the so-called hero, are standing here in uniform, transferring a prisoner to a place like that. She poked his chest. In the next second, Ian grabbed the chain of her handcuffs sharply. Shut your mouth, he ordered. Rosen got him, so she pressed further. So you call this a victory? She challenged. Don't talk about things you don't understand, Ian warned. But she didn't stop. She waited for his patience to snap. She braced herself. She was used to pain. She expected the blow. Instead, a loud bang echoed through the room. Ian's fist had struck the door, not her. Rosen Howers, he said through clenched teeth. You're right. She froze. But you don't have the right to say that. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with restrained fury. So many of my comrades were injured. So many died. History will not remember them. It never does. His breathing was heavy now. They lost their youth, their lives, for the public. We never expected people like you to be grateful, people who only know how to run. But at the very least, his voice lowered. Don't insult them. Rosen stepped out of Ian's cabin, her grip tightening around the cold chain at her wrists. What had she expected from that man? There were times during the war when his voice had echoed through the sky, carried by broadcasts. She had listened to it for hours back then. And now that she had heard it in person, perhaps she had been foolish enough to think that if she kept talking to him, one day he might answer her in that same calm, warm tone. What an idiot she was. You braided your hair, washed your face. Now what? Henry said sarcastically as he walked beside her. Need some makeup too? Why not? Rosen replied dramatically. Don't be ridiculous, Henry muttered, grabbing the chain of her handcuffs more firmly. Don't try those tricks. He won't fall for it. Rosen sighed. He was right, and she almost wished Ian Connor were half as easy to manipulate as this man. She smiled suddenly. Or perhaps you're the one who's attracted to me? Henry nearly choked. What are you even saying? Let's just walk in silence. As they turned the corner, Rosen's eyes caught sight of Lila again. The little girl was wandering alone. A flicker of concern crossed her face. Would she really be all right, roaming around like this? Her gaze shifted back to Henry. He was fumbling absently with the keys at his waist. They really did look alike. Rosen leaned down slightly. Your niece is adorable. Lila, right? Henry stiffened. What? How do you know her name? As he turned back hurriedly, the keys slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Rosen smiled sweetly. Don't worry, what could I possibly do in cuffs? Henry sighed as he picked them up. You really are a witch. But stay away from Lila. He turned again. That was when Rosen saw it. Lila was clutching her throat. Her small body trembled. Her face had turned pale. She was struggling to breathe. Henry! Rosen's voice sharpened. We need to call a doctor! Henry turned and froze. Hey, snap out of it! We need a doctor! Rosen shouted. But he stood there, stunned. What was wrong with him? Useless. Rosen began shouting for help, but the corridor was empty. She turned back to Henry urgently. I can help her. Uncuff me. Memories flashed in her mind. Why do we even need to learn this, Emily? She had once complained. Of course we need to, Emily had replied patiently. People die all the time during war. Human life is fragile. But you don't need this knowledge to cure people, Rosen had argued. And why should we even save them? It's not like anyone's grateful. Emily had smiled softly at her. Rosen, no one can save the world alone. Not everyone can wield magic. But there comes a time when we all require its power. The words rang clearly in her mind now. Rosen rushed toward Lila. Moments later, people began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Murmurs spread through the corridor. That young lady saved the child. Rosen sat frozen. On the floor, Lila cradled in her arms. The girl's breathing slowly steadied. After a while, Rosen whispered softly, relief flooding her voice. I saved her life, Emily. Finally, Henry snapped out of his shock and rushed forward. Lila, are you okay? He asked urgently, kneeling beside her. One of the guest ladies stepped forward. I didn't see everything, but that young woman was holding the child and performing first aid. It looked like she was choking. Rosen remained seated on the floor. Her eyes drifted to the small candy lying nearby. The one Lila had been choking on. Such a tiny thing, so harmless looking. Yet it had almost taken a life. Maybe this candy was just as lethal as a bullet. You didn't have to be a soldier to save someone. And you didn't have to be a soldier to kill someone either. You were right, Emily, Rosen thought quietly. A faint smile touched her lips. Hey, she said lightly to Henry, did you see that? If you want to thank me, she continued, lifting her chin slightly, I'd appreciate some water to wash myself. And maybe some decent food sent to my cell while you're at it. Before Henry could respond, another voice spoke. I will see to that. Rosen looked up. Ian Connor stood there. Before she could say anything, a trembling voice echoed down the corridor. Oh, my child! Are you all right? Grandpa! Lila cried, rushing into the old man's arms. Rosen watched silently. So, this was the captain of the ship. Lila's grandfather. She glanced back at Ian. I was just joking. I don't need a reward. It's not difficult, Ian replied calmly. Soldiers always pay their debts. You may be a prisoner, but you are no exception. He reached for her wrists and fastened the handcuffs back on. But this remains. Hey, Rosen protested. Then how am I supposed to wash myself? I'll have someone assist you, Ian replied evenly. Ian Connor, the old man's voice thundered behind them. Who taught you your manners? It certainly wasn't me. How dare you put a lady who saved Lila in chains? But that's the rule, Captain Reville, Ian answered firmly. Let her enjoy her freedom. For the moment, the captain insisted. Where would she even go in the middle of the ocean? I cannot ignore the law, Ian argued. That law applies on land, the old man retorted sharply. On the Viheth, I am the law. Rosen almost enjoyed the exchange. But when her eyes fell on Lila again, alive, breathing, smiling faintly, she felt nothing but relief. Captain, she is a prisoner, Ian insisted. The old man gently patted Lila's head. To me, she is the hero who saved my granddaughter. He then turned toward Rosen. Lady Howers, please forgive this foolish young man and his rudeness. Accept my sincere gratitude. Then he paused, realizing something. Oh, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself properly. He straightened slightly. I am former Navy Admiral Alex Reville. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Who hadn't heard of Alex Reville? His statue, depicting him standing firm against the enemy, was a famous tourist attraction. She cleared her throat. Captain, I am no lady. And not Howers either. My name is Rosen Walker. You probably already know. Yes, Miss Walker, he said warmly. But if it weren't for you, I might have lost my only grandchild. He studied her thoughtfully. I heard your request, he continued. But treating you like a hero inside that cell would be a disgrace. So, Miss Walker, he said kindly, if you have nothing scheduled tomorrow evening, would you do me the honor of joining us for dinner? Rosen couldn't even imagine herself sitting at such an elegant dinner table. Crystal glasses, fine cutlery, silk gowns. It felt absurd. She opened her mouth to decline, but Captain Reville raised a gentle hand. You don't need to worry so much, he said warmly. It's just family. Before she could respond, Ian stepped forward. Captain Reville, I don't think that would be appropriate. He paused. His eyes met Rosen's. What was he about to say? A murderer? A witch? Someone lowly who doesn't belong among us? Filthy? Dangerous? Suddenly, an old memory surfaced in Rosen's mind. It is always my hope that my aviation corps will better protect all of you. That gentle voice. She had listened to it countless times during the war, cheeks flushing as it echoed through the broadcasts. Now, because she's a murderer, Ian finished coldly. The voice did not match the one in her memory. Not at all, Rosen scoffed lightly. Thank you, Captain Reville, she said smoothly. I'm deeply honored. How could I possibly refuse a good meal? She accepted the invitation, cutting Ian's protest short. Ian stared at her in disbelief. Rosen avoided his gaze, but her thoughts drifted back again. Those flyers again, Rosen? Emily had once teased when she saw her collecting them. I just saw them on the ground, Rosen had said casually, gathering the papers with Ian Connor's face printed across them. Emily had sighed. You're head over heels. Just be careful Hindley doesn't see them. Rosen had only half listened. Her entire attention had been on the man in the picture, Ian Connor. It was difficult for her to admit now that she had once admired him so deeply, and each time he reminded her, through his cold words and rigid stance, that he was nothing like the man of her dreams, her anger rose uncontrollably. He should have remained nothing more than a distant fantasy. But no. Her life had always had a strange habit of dragging her exactly where she never wanted to go. The next day, an attendant arranged by Captain Reville led Rosen to a private bath. Steam filled the room. Rosen lowered herself into the hot water, and for a brief moment, it felt like heaven. She had accepted the captain's invitation only to irritate Ian Connor. But this was unexpectedly good. She couldn't even remember the last time she had bathed like this. Yet she knew better than to grow attached. Warmth had always been a luxury in her life. She had been an idiot once, clinging to small comforts as if they would last forever. Not anymore. Outside, raised voices broke the quiet. Henry had arrived. You can't go in, the attendant insisted. It's Commander Connor's order, Henry replied firmly. Hearing the commotion, Rosen stepped out, wrapping a towel around herself. What is it? She called. Do you have something to say to me? Henry immediately covered his eyes. You are aware that I'm a man, right? He muttered awkwardly. He turned to the attendants. Wait outside. I have something confidential to discuss with her. It won't take long. They hesitated, but at the mention of Ian Connor's name, they obeyed and stepped out. Rosen narrowed her eyes. So what is it? Rushing in here and forcing everyone out? Henry sighed. Just stay there. I'll leave once I'm done. Rosen slipped back into the tub behind the screen. You're a terrible liar, she said coolly. Ian Connor would never order you to come into my bath. At most, he'd tell you to guard the door. So whatever it is, say it without using your boss as an excuse. Henry hesitated. Then he said quietly, It's about Lila. Rosen's expression softened slightly. Oh? How is she? She's fine. The doctor saw her last night. Rosen nodded, but it was Henry who didn't seem fine. Are you really a pilot? She asked casually. You didn't look very brave last night. Henry fell silent for a moment. Then he spoke. I had a sister and a brother-in-law, Lila's parents. Rosen didn't interrupt. You know Ryerton was bombed during the war, right? He continued. Were you there that day? Rosen sighed softly. No, she hadn't been there. That was the day she escaped prison for the first time. It was only later, in Alcapez, that she learned what had happened to Ryerton. My sister was there, Henry said quietly. Lila was just a baby. Rosen listened in silence. When she had first heard about the bombing, she hadn't believed it. How could a city as large as Ryerton simply disappear overnight? You know, I could have stopped it, Henry murmured slowly. But I didn't. It wasn't something that concerned Rosen directly. But still, why didn't you stop it? She asked quietly. Henry exhaled. That day, we ran into enemy aircraft in our airspace. It was chaos. Their fleet split into two groups, one heading toward Malona and the other toward Ryerton. He swallowed. Malona was the capital city, and Ryerton was our hometown. Rosen listened in silence. It was Commander Ian Connor who had to decide, Henry continued. He said, "We will defend Malona." He let out a long breath. It was the right choice. I don't blame him. There was nothing more we could have done. He looked down at his hands. During the war, I kept going, but when it ended, my head broke. I couldn't fly anymore. That's when I realized I wasn't the man I used to be. He paused. But I still have Lila. The room fell quiet. So is that why you hate me? Rosen asked slowly. Because I'm the criminal who survived, while your innocent sister died? Henry didn't hesitate. Yes. Rosen nodded faintly. I see. That's understandable. Then go on hating me. Just as people needed a hero to worship, they also needed a witch to blame. Two sides of the same coin. Henry took a breath. But I came here to apologize, he said at last. Without you, Lila wouldn't be here. His voice softened. Thank you for saving her life, Rosen Walker. Outside, the attendants shifted nervously. They wanted to step in, but how could they, if it was supposedly Commander Connor's order? Then their eyes widened. Ian Connor himself had just arrived. Inside, Rosen peeked from behind the screen. Thank you, she said lightly. Then how about showing me how grateful you are? Her gaze drifted toward the keys hanging at Henry's waist. Never, Henry said firmly. Don't even think about it. Rosen smiled. Why do you treat me like that? Because I'm a prisoner? Do you really believe I killed him? Henry stiffened. What if I didn't? She continued softly. And even if we pretend I did, what if he deserved to die? Henry clutched his head. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Don't trick me. Rosen laughed quietly. Fine, forget the keys. How about another favor? She stepped closer, lowering her voice, whispering something near his ear. Henry's eyebrows rose. What are you up to now? Nothing, she replied sweetly. Just asking for a small favor. The door suddenly swung open. Ian Connor stood at the entrance. What on earth is going on here? He demanded furiously. Henry's face paled the moment he saw Ian at the door. It's not what it looks like, he blurted out. Ian's eyes shifted to Rosen, then back to Henry. Are you really going to try to convince me of that right now? He asked coldly. Henry hesitated. Well, you see, I needed to talk to Rosen Walker. Ian's jaw tightened. Get out. Now. Henry didn't argue further. He stepped out, knowing very well he was already in trouble. The door shut. Ian turned slowly toward Rosen. Without a word, he grabbed a large towel from the side. Rosen Walker, he said stiffly, pointing toward the sofa. Please sit there. She hesitated but obeyed. In the next second, he wrapped the towel securely around her, covering her properly. She looked up at him. He seemed angry, but there was something else there too. Silence lingered. He looked awkward, almost uneasy. Finally, he spoke. Did Henry do something against your will? He asked carefully. I mean, did he force you in any way? Rosen blinked. No. Ian's gaze didn't soften. You can tell me. If you want, I can arrange a different guard for you. She studied him. Why was he doing this? Henry was his subordinate. She was just a convicted prisoner, a so-called witch. Do you not even trust your own men? She asked lightly. The ones who fought beside you in war? Ian answered immediately. People are complex. He's a good soldier. That doesn't make him perfect. He looked directly at her. So answer me. Nothing happened? Rosen held his gaze, then decided to take pity on him. It's nothing like that, she said casually. We were just talking. Apparently, he was too shy to thank me in front of everyone. She smirked faintly. But trust me, I wouldn't waste my time with a big baby like him. Boring. And it's clear he couldn't give me what I wanted anyway, so what's the use? Ian's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you manage to deceive everyone? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. It's obvious, he continued. You're always looking for a chance to lie. Even now, I can read you like a book. Rosen smiled slowly. Would you like to know how I managed to deceive everyone? Ian didn't respond. Instead of standing over her, he quietly sat down in front of her. Because I didn't deceive anyone, Rosen said calmly. They just pretend to be deceived. Ian frowned slightly. What do you mean? It doesn't matter whether I'm a good liar or not, she said. People only hear what they want to hear. No one truly cares about the truth. They just need a scapegoat, someone they can point at without feeling guilty. So I say whatever I want, knowing nothing will change regardless of what I say. She tilted her head, smiling. But I suppose you really are a hero. So noble of you to even take time to worry about a lowly prisoner like me. Ian ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back. Then he looked at her quietly. Then tell me, he asked, do you also consider me a hero? Rosen laughed softly. Does it surprise you that even a criminal like me would look up to a hero? Ian rubbed the back of his neck. No, I didn't mean... I had a crush on you. Like everyone else, she said casually. The sudden confession froze him in place. Seeing his expression, she added lightly, I'm a citizen too, you know. Are you offended? I used to collect those flyers with your face whenever they rained from the sky. He looked genuinely surprised. You collected them? She nodded. It's nothing strange. You know that, right? Know what? That you're a good-looking man, she replied with a grin. The words slipped out too easily. Realizing what she had just said, her face flushed. She quickly turned away. So don't bother Henry, she muttered. And please send the cabin maids back. I need to get dressed. I won't do anything. You can post guards outside if you're worried. Ian slowly stood up. He stepped forward and offered her his hand. Rosen blinked in surprise. I'm not offended, he said quietly. I was just... taken aback. He looked at her steadily. And I think you were right. We're not that different. Her heart skipped. So let's go, he added. Go where? She asked slowly, reaching out hesitantly. To get you dressed, he replied. It's time for the dinner you were so excited about. Before she could think further, she placed her hand in his. In one swift motion, Ian pulled her up, and the next second, he lifted her onto his shoulder like luggage. Wait, what are you doing? She shouted, startled and furious. Just send the maids back. There's no telling what you might do, Ian replied firmly as he walked. I can't trust you. He stopped briefly and added in a lower tone. It was a mistake to obey the captain's order, and now I can't even trust Henry. He set her down inside the dressing room and refastened the handcuffs securely. So I'll handle it myself. He looked directly at her. Saving the child, now everyone has a soft spot for you except me. His voice remained calm. I will not underestimate you. Rosen scoffed. What? Are you afraid of me? Afraid I might escape? Ian held her gaze. Yes, I am afraid of you, he answered plainly. The honesty stunned her. He had the authority, the strength, the control. Why would he be afraid? Ian stepped back and called for the maids to enter. I'll be outside, he said shortly. He stood by the door himself, guarding it. Inside, Rosen stared at his silhouette through the gap. She still didn't understand. Why was he afraid of her? A moment earlier, Ian's eyes had fallen on the belongings brought into his study from his luggage. His brows furrowed. Among the neatly stacked items lay a file, one he had specifically ordered to be burned. Yet it was still there. Assuming it was a simple miscommunication, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were carefully collected newspaper articles, and throughout the collection, one name had been circled again and again in red ink. Rosen Walker. Ian stared at it in silence, a cigar burning slowly between his lips. At first, it had only been something to pass the time. A habit. A distraction to survive the endless days that came after the war. After the war, every night he dreamed the same dream. His aircraft spiraling down, sinking into dark water, the cold swallowing him whole. It was a nightmare that hunted him relentlessly. He knew he was not in a good place, not in the right state of mind, but no one could ever know that. He could not afford to break. He was the symbol of victory. One night, unable to sleep, he had picked up a newspaper. He read without truly reading, forcing words into his mind without understanding them. Sometimes his eyes stopped at one word, Riorton. The city reduced to ruins because of a choice he had made. But nowhere in those articles was his name blamed. Instead, they spoke of a witch, a villain, a scapegoat, a name manufactured by the press, the government, the military. Rosen Howers. From that day onward, it was as though he had been bewitched. He searched for her name everywhere. To him, she felt like another version of himself. In a way, they both carried misfortune. But if they were both simply cursed by fate, why did the world see them so differently? Why was she labeled a witch, evil and unforgivable, while he was labeled a hero, the savior of the nation? She had taken one life deliberately. He had taken more than 15,000 unwillingly. If the weight of their sins were placed side by side, whose would be heavier? Sometimes, a quiet thought whispered inside him. Run away. Don't get caught. Go far away and live the rest of your life. Witch or not, innocent or guilty. Ian Connor did not truly care, because she was the one person who had survived Riorton, the one person he had been able to save, if only by accident. Who would have imagined that the man praised as the nation's hero was in reality this broken inside, that somewhere inside he was quietly rooting for a convicted criminal to escape? Ian was sitting in his study, trying to arrange his thoughts, when the door suddenly opened. A small figure peeked in. Ian, can I come in? Lila asked sweetly, holding a bundle of toys in her arms. Sure, Ian replied, a little surprised. What are all those? I want to give Rosen a gift at the party, Lila said, stepping inside. But I don't know which one she'd like, so... Can you choose one for me? You know her best. Ian blinked. I do? Lila nodded confidently. Yes, that's yours, right? She pointed toward the file on his desk. One of the cabin maids was going to burn it the other day, but I told her not to. I brought it back for you. Ian's face stiffened. How long have you known about this, Lila? He asked carefully. Lila looked up at him innocently. Well, everyone has been collecting news clippings about Rosen, so I thought I would too. But when I looked at your newspaper, all the parts about her had already been cut out. Ian covered his face for a moment, embarrassed. Then he picked Lila up gently, taking a slow breath to steady himself. Have you told anyone about this? He asked calmly. No, not yet. He nodded. Then will you promise me to keep this our secret? Why? Lila tilted her head. Will you get in trouble if I tell? Ian gave a small nod. You see, she's a prisoner and I'm her guard. Lila thought for a moment, then nodded seriously. Okay, I don't want you to get in trouble. She hesitated before adding, but I thought you hated her. Ian shook his head. No, I don't hate her. This is just my job. I'm not supposed to have feelings about it. He paused. Besides, she saved your life, so I won't be rude to her. Lila's eyes brightened. Then, do you like her? Ian froze for a brief second. I don't like or dislike her, Lila, he answered evenly. Lila considered that, then asked, then can I like her? Ian looked at her. I know she killed someone, Lila continued softly, but she also saved me. So, she's at 0 now, right? So it's okay if I like her? Before Ian could respond, Lila held out her hand. This is for you, she said. A small coin rested in her palm. It's a lucky coin. It will bring you good luck. I think you need it more than me. You always have bad dreams. Ian frowned slightly. Where did you get this, Lila? Lila averted her gaze like a child caught doing something she shouldn't have. Ian sighed. Never accept anything from her, he said gently, even if she's not a witch. You still have to be careful. Still, he kept the coin. Throwing it away didn't feel right. Now go get ready for dinner, he added. Lila nodded, then paused at the door. But Ian, do you know where Uncle Henry is? He's keeping an eye on Rosen Howers, Ian replied. Lila shook her head. But I just checked. He was not outside the door. Ian froze, then headed for the door. As he stood outside, he forced himself to stay calm. After all, he was used to this, hiding his emotions, burying them deep where no one could see. Hey, nothing happened. You have to believe me, Henry pleaded, his voice strained with urgency. Ian didn't budge. Be quiet, he said coldly, and behave properly. I am behaving. We were just talking, Henry argued. Inside the room, Rosen stood still, listening. A flicker of worry crossed her face. Was Henry going to get in trouble because of her? Miss Howers, you look wonderful, the maid said gently, giving her a small push. Why don't you step out? Rosen stepped outside. Dressed in a soft green gown, her hair neatly styled, she looked nothing like a prisoner, more like a noble lady. Only the handcuffs betrayed the truth. Both men froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Rosen's cheeks flushed, part embarrassment, part annoyance. Why are they just staring? Say something. Henry was the first to move. He stepped forward, smiling. Miss Howers, you look great. Allow me to be your escort this evening. Rosen glanced up at him. He was good-looking. She smiled faintly and reached out. All right, I'll trust you this once. But before her hand could fully meet his, Ian stepped in. He pushed her back slightly, his gaze sharp as it landed on Henry. Henry, you are not allowed near Rosen. Henry's expression fell. I thought we already talked about this. It was a misunderstanding. We did, Ian replied. But this isn't about that. I don't trust you with this. Henry frowned. Why not? Because being too friendly can be just as dangerous as being hostile. Henry stared at him. You don't trust me? You think I'd set her free and ignore your orders? Ian said nothing. Henry's face stiffened in disbelief. This isn't about that misunderstanding, Ian continued coldly. There's no telling what kind of scheme the two of you came up with in that room. Rosen, standing beside them, felt both amused and a little guilty. He's not wrong. But she was just asking about tonight's dinner, Henry added quickly. She said there was a dish she wanted to eat. Rosen's face paled. He actually said that out loud. Ian turned toward her. So, what did you want to eat? Before she could answer, Rosen! Lila's cheerful voice broke through. She ran forward with her grandfather. You look so pretty, Lila said brightly. Hello, Lila. You look pretty too, Rosen replied softly. But you look like a princess, Lila added, stepping closer. Ian immediately stepped in front of Rosen. Lila, you can talk to her from there. Rosen watched him. Even to a child, he remained this cold. There you go again, a voice interrupted. Captain Reville stepped forward, shaking his head lightly. Why are you always so suspicious about everything? He turned to Rosen with a polite nod. My apologies, Miss Walker. Dinner will be served shortly. His eyes then dropped to the handcuffs. He paused. Instead of addressing Ian directly, he turned to Henry. Henry, would you kindly assist Miss Walker during dinner? I will do it. Ian's voice cut in firmly. Everyone turned toward him. I'll handle it, he repeated. He looked at Rosen. Any objections? She shook her head lightly. Of course not. Then it's settled, Ian said. Let's go. He grabbed her hand and began leading the way. Rosen glanced at him. Something was different. The look in his eyes today, it wasn't the same as before. Was she imagining it? No, those gray eyes, they felt sharper now, more piercing. Maybe he was right. Maybe they really were the same. Or maybe she was just deluding herself again, clinging to some fantasy to survive this reality. His eyes annoyed her. They weren't warm, they weren't cold, they revealed nothing, and yet she wanted to know what was hidden behind them. Hey, she said suddenly, pulling slightly. When are you going to let go of my hand? Ian paused, then released the chain. I was just trying to guide you. I didn't mean to. I know, she murmured, averting her gaze. She had always known. I will always protect you. Those promises had been lies, and yet she had held on to them. Because she needed something to believe in. She had fallen in love with a version of him that only existed in her mind. And now, when she needed to stay calm, she could barely meet his eyes. Get a grip, she told herself. She could no longer afford to be fooled by those lies. Rosen entered the grand hall beside Ian. The sight before her was breathtaking. The entire room glittered like something out of a dream. A servant pulled out a chair for her. As she took her seat, Rosen realized she hadn't encountered a single noble on her way to the hall. Perhaps they didn't want anyone witnessing a prisoner being treated like this. When the soup was served, her eyes sparkled with delight. She instinctively reached forward. "Walker, stop," Henry interrupted. "Are you going to eat with cuffs? And the captain hasn't begun the meal yet." "But he said the party had begun," Rosen replied. Henry sighed. "That doesn't mean we can start. We have to wait until all the appetizers are served. Don't you know proper etiquette?" Rosen flinched. How would she know? This was her first dinner party. Did they think she was some noble lady from a wealthy family? It was painfully clear she didn't belong here. Forget what he said and just eat. The calm voice beside her silenced the tension. Ian lifted the spoon and held it out to her. Rosen hesitated, then leaned forward and swallowed the soup. Ian glanced toward Henry. "You certainly didn't care about etiquette during the war, Henry." "That was different," Henry replied quickly. "And I didn't mean to embarrass her." As they bickered, Rosen quietly studied Ian. He fed her with steady precision, his expression as stoic as ever. Just look at him. He was taking care of her so delicately, without the slightest change in that cold, stony face. Ignoring the thought, Rosen began trying everything on the table. Each dish was exquisite, more delicious than the last. Whatever she pointed at, Ian obliged without hesitation, but at one point he paused and frowned. "Slow down," he advised. "You're going to choke." Rosen glared at him. "Now my eating annoys you too?" "I never said that," Ian replied with a sigh. "I'm just saying you'll regret it if you end up choking." "Then why do you look so annoyed?" she asked. Ian frowned slightly. "That's just my face." Around the table everyone nodded in agreement. Rosen blinked, momentarily stunned. It was strange. Normally he ignored her. But tonight he was going back and forth with her as if they were equals. After a brief silence, Ian spoke again. "Were you a nurse?" "No." "Then how did you learn emergency first aid like that? Or—" He paused, studying her carefully. "Did you use magic?" Rosen looked surprised at first, then smirked. "It's funny how it's always called witchcraft when a woman does something remarkable," she said coolly. "And to answer your question, I wasn't a nurse, but my husband was a doctor." She paused briefly. "A quack, actually. He didn't even have a proper license. But I picked up a few things from watching him." Of course, Hindley Howers had once had a wife who truly was a witch, but it wasn't her. Emily was the real witch. An awkward silence settled over the table, as though it had finally struck them. She was a murderer, but it had all been over the news for years, so why did he have to ask? "Miss Walker," Captain Reville spoke gently, breaking the tension. "May I ask how old you are? The newspapers were quite insistent about your age. One even claimed you were 70 and used magic to appear younger." Rosen answered calmly. "I am 25 years old, Captain." The captain stared in surprise. "Then that means—" "When you got married?" Rosen nodded. "Yes, I was 15. The captain let out a hesitant laugh. "That was rather young. Was it your parents' decision?" "No, sir. I am an orphan." Silence fell once again. The atmosphere grew heavy, uncomfortable. Henry cleared his throat. "A 15-year-old getting married? How old was your husband then?" Rosen continued chewing her food. "Why does it matter? He's dead." The table fell silent yet again. She hadn't meant to kill the mood, but it was the truth. Ian sighed softly. "Both of you, please stop this and enjoy your meal. Don't forget Lila is here." "It's okay, Ian," Lila said innocently. "I've already read the articles. I know Rosen killed her husband." A pause followed. "But it might not have been her who did it," Lila added, lowering her gaze. "Lila," Ian reminded gently, "she has already been convicted." "But she says she didn't do it," Lila argued. "Why won't anyone listen?" "Because she is lying," Ian replied firmly. "It is true that she saved you, but she also killed her husband." Lila looked down, her voice trembling. "But if nobody believed me—" "It's possible nobody believed Rosen either, and I'd be upset if it were like that." Her eyes filled with tears. Under the table, Rosen kicked Ian lightly, whispering for him to be kinder. Ian frowned. "Why did you give her that coin?" "That coin was already hers," Rosen replied. "I just performed a little trick and gave it back." She knew what he meant. He was reminding her that she had lied to Lila about it bringing luck, and therefore she was a liar. "But Rosen was telling the truth!" Lila exclaimed. "It really did bring me luck." "It's all right, Lila," Rosen said softly. "It's fine. Coincidences added up. And sometimes a lie became the truth. Children were innocent. And it was easy to take advantage of that innocence. And that was all she had done. Soon new dishes were served. Rosen's eyes lit up with delight as she gazed at them. Then her attention paused at one particular plate. "Howers, is there anything you'd like to try?" Ian asked. Rosen grinned. "Yes, I'd like to have Mary a fruit." Ian sliced the fruit carefully and dipped the spoon before offering it to her. She tightened her grip and swallowed it. "Is there anything else we can get for you, Miss Walker?" the captain asked politely. "Howers, the captain is asking you something," Ian said, turning toward her. Then he froze. His eyes widened. Rosen sat there. A thin red drop of blood began to ooze from the corner of her lips. "What's wrong, Walker?" someone exclaimed. Chairs scraped as everyone stood. In the next moment, Rosen collapsed to the floor. She had succeeded. She was sorry Lila had to witness this, but she would not return to her cell without a fight. She needed more time. Her present self knew there were no such things as saviors. Patience and anticipation only led to disappointment. She had to save herself, even if it meant hurting herself in the process. And hopefully, Ian Connor would react exactly as she expected. "Rosen!" Ian's fearful voice echoed through the hall. As darkness closed in, she shut her eyes, wishing that, even for a moment, he would be distracted. Ian caught Rosen in his arms the moment she collapsed. Without a second thought, he rushed her to the ship's medical cabin. After examining her, the doctor stepped outside. "Was it poison?" Ian asked immediately. "No," the doctor replied firmly. "I am certain it wasn't poison. When he had first been called, it was reported as a poisoning attempt. But when he arrived, the situation had been chaotic, everyone panicking, even the soldier escorted back to his cabin. The only one who seemed composed was Sir Ian Connor, and even he seemed slightly off. But that was understandable. It was a serious situation. It was simply her body reacting to that fruit, the doctor explained. That's all. Everyone else who ate it is perfectly fine." Ian's gaze sharpened. "So you're saying she did it on purpose?" The doctor hesitated. "I can't say for sure. If she wasn't aware of the allergy, then it was an accident. But if she was aware," he paused, "then it would be self-harm." Ian's eyes widened. He turned toward Rosen, lying unconscious. "Are you saying she tried to take her life?" "Well, it's not uncommon," the doctor said calmly. "She's a prisoner bound for the Isle of Monte. Many would rather die than be imprisoned there." Ian's jaw tightened. "Is she dying?" "No," the doctor replied. "I've done everything I can. She's simply fainted." "Then why isn't she waking up?" "She's malnourished and weak," the doctor explained. "It may take time for her to regain consciousness." Ian's voice grew quieter, more serious. "If she doesn't wake up, could she die?" The doctor hesitated again. "I cannot say for certain, but it is possible. Prisoners often fall ill in such conditions. Given her current state, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think she could become sick and die as a result." "Ian!" a small voice called from behind. Ian turned. Lila stood there, her eyes filled with worry. "Are you going to send Rosen back?" she asked softly. "I went there. I saw the place. It wasn't good." Her voice trembled. "She'll get sick there. Please don't send her back. Please, just let her rest a little longer before you send her back." Tears welled up in her eyes. Ian looked at her silently for a moment. Then he gently patted her head. Turning to the attendants, he gave a firm order. "Move her to my cabin." Everyone froze in shock. "Sir, she is a prisoner," one of them said hesitantly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Ian replied without hesitation. "She is a prisoner. That's why I must watch her myself." Lately, he had begun to forget his mission. And he didn't understand why. Why was he so concerned about her? She was a convicted murderer. And he was the one dragging her toward a place worse than hell, so why? "I had a crush on you, like everyone else. You were my hero, too." Her words from the other day echoed clearly in his mind. And for some reason, he couldn't ignore them. Rosen was allergic to Maria fruit. Emily had clearly warned her to avoid it. And yet, whenever life became unbearably painful, the thought of that fruit always crossed Rosen's mind. Wouldn't it be a more comfortable death? At least, compared to being beaten to death by Hindley. But this time, death was not what she wanted. If she had truly intended to give up, she would never have gone through all that effort to escape prison. Twice. Her eyes slowly opened. The room around her was unfamiliar. "Where am I?" she murmured, pushing herself up weakly. Her gaze fell to the cuff attached to the bed. A faint smile spread across her lips. At least, she wasn't back in the cell. Then it had been worth it. Still, she wouldn't do it again. Her entire body felt like it was burning, and for a moment she wondered if Lila was all right. "Miss Walker, how are you feeling?" Rosen turned. The captain had entered the room. "Oh, Captain, I didn't see you there," she said softly. "It's all right. Don't strain yourself," he replied gently. "The doctor said you need plenty of rest." Rosen nodded. "I see." The captain sat down and looked at her quietly for a moment. "Do you know how much time we have left before reaching the Isle of Monte?" he asked. Rosen blinked, startled. "We will arrive in 3 days," he continued. "We are heading west. Even though the wind is against us, sailing is easy now with steamers. Quite impressive, isn't it?" "Is this your cabin, Captain?" Rosen asked. "No," he replied. "It's Ian's." "Then, where is he?" "He stepped out for a smoke." Rosen paused, remembering. "I thought pilots didn't smoke." The captain was silent for a moment before answering. "Well, the war is over. But he's still a pilot, right? There are still aircraft to be flown." "No," the captain said. "He's quitting. He has done enough." "I see," Rosen murmured. For some reason, that made her feel sad. "He was very worried about you, Miss Walker," the captain added. Rosen let out a small laugh. "I'm sure he's regretting his decision. After all, he hates breaking rules." "You see," the captain said slowly, "he may not be as warm as the war propaganda made him seem, but he is not as cold as you think." He reached into a drawer. "Look at this." He pulled out a small glowing object. "I gave him this when he was about 12. I found it while sailing through the Kinteri Islands. It's fluorescent moss. You can see it glow like a torch at night. He handed it to Rosen. Then he took out a few more items, these as well, a pair of binoculars, and a sea chart. He pretends not to care, but he's quite sentimental. He pointed at the map. Here, this is where we are now. And this is where we started. We've made good progress. I gave him this 15 years ago. Rosen looked at the chart carefully. It seems you've known him since he was very young, she said. You could say that, the captain replied. He was a few years above Henry in military school. I suppose they were close then? The captain shook his head lightly. No, Henry hated him, said he was too strict, too stiff, called him a devil and begged me to take him home. He paused. But even without Henry, I would have noticed Ian. He stood out. Rosen smiled faintly. His parents must have been proud of him. To her, Ian. Connor was someone who must have grown up surrounded by love, a proud family, a large home, a life she could never imagine, a perfect portrait. I'm sure they would have been, the captain said quietly, if they had lived to see him grow. Rosen flinched. His parents are gone, the captain continued. He lost them both to illness when he was very young. He looked down. After that, he and his inheritance were passed from one relative to another until he entered military school at the age of 10. I believe he was tired of people fighting over what he owned. He sighed. In military school, the government takes care of everything. Perhaps that was his only escape. His voice softened. He was forced to grow up too quickly. He doesn't express emotions. Well, and even when he does, he's not honest about them. He keeps everything buried. I feel sorry for that child. It's like he was forced to grow up too soon. The captain reached out and gently placed his hand over Rosen's. Never try to take your own life. Please, I beg you. Rosen understood. That was where all of this was leading, but that's not what happened, she said quietly. It wasn't deliberate. I just wanted to try that fruit. The captain lowered his gaze. Miss Walker, he said softly. I once had a daughter too. Rosen looked at him. I see so much of her in you. She was my first child, a precious gift after 15 years of marriage. His voice wavered slightly, but she was gone too soon. Rosen didn't respond. She knew. This wasn't about her anymore. This was a grieving father speaking, seeing his daughter in someone like her. The captain stood. You still look tired. Please get some rest. Yes, Rosen replied. As he reached the door, he paused. As I said, the Isle of Monte is still far away, he added. And I believe you are not someone who gives up, Miss Walker. Rosen listened carefully. If there was one thing she was good at, it was picking up crucial details from casual conversations. Wind, direction, temperature, the route. She didn't understand everything. But one thing became clear. If she wanted to escape, she had to head east. As the sun set and darkness settled over the sea, Rosen lay on the bed, staring at the small glowing object the captain had given her. It truly shone in the dark. Like a lighthouse, the kind of light that made you feel relieved after being lost at sea for too long. Now, she only needed a key. If she could get that from Ian Connor, and perhaps a gun as well, then what? She would be lying if she said those creatures in the ocean didn't terrify her. But she also knew how to overcome fear. A memory surfaced. Emily, run away to Valpurgis. You're a witch. You can do it, Rosen had shouted. But what about you? Emily had asked, her voice trembling. I won't die, Rosen had said firmly. I will survive, I promise. That day, it had been the first time Rosen had done something brave, a rare, shining moment in her otherwise miserable life. When she looked back at it now, it felt like a blue flame burning inside her heart, a flame that melted away fear and turned it into something lighter, something that allowed her to rise again. We will meet again, I promise. She had made that promise, and that fire still burned within her. No matter what, no matter who stood in her way, she would never accept defeat again. The door opened. Ian stepped into the cabin. Rosen immediately stood up, loosening the lace of her dress slightly. Where have you been? She asked, her tone soft, deliberate. I was waiting for you. She tried to seduce him, but Ian remained unmoved, his expression as cold as ever. How are you feeling? He asked instead. Rosen's face stiffened. So he was going to ignore it? I'm fine, she replied, forcing a smile. But where were you all this time? I was guarding the door. His tone was calm, matter-of-fact. Why work so hard? She said lightly. A normal person would just have one of his men do it. It's not that big of a deal. A minister ordered me to personally oversee you, Ian replied. You underestimate yourself. Your fame exceeds mine. Rosen let out a soft laugh. My infamy, to be exact. She tilted her head. So what now? Dinner is over. Are you sending me back to my cell? No, Ian said. Your condition isn't good. Until we reach the Isle of Monte, you'll stay here. Rosen smiled faintly. That's fine with me. But where will you stay? A spare room? Ian looked at her. This is my cabin, he said. Where else would I go? I'll sleep on the couch. His eyes narrowed slightly. And you'll try something the moment I leave. I can already see it on your face. Rosen's gaze flickered to his waist. The key was gone. He wasn't joking. He wasn't that careless. She laughed lightly. What are you talking about? You think I'd try to jump into the ocean? Ian's expression hardened. You tried to kill yourself. I'm not taking any more chances. So you're going to tie me up in this room? Rosen shot back. Didn't the captain tell you? I wasn't trying to kill myself. You clearly knew you could die from eating that fruit, Ian said sharply. That's why you specifically asked Henry for it, so don't make excuses. Rosen flinched. Wait, let me explain, she said quickly, but Ian finally turned fully toward her. Was it fun for you? He asked, his expression hurtful. You made me feed it to you, he continued, with my own hands. Rosen stared at him. For a brief moment, was he angry? She had been observing him for days. Ian Connor was not someone who raised his voice or gave in to emotion. He was always controlled, always rational, and if he had thought rationally, he would have known there was no way she had truly intended to kill herself. But right now, it was as if he had lost that control, and if that was the case, then she had to take this opportunity. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to sob. You're right, she whispered weakly. What's the point of living? I'm going to end my life. Only torture and hard labor await me anyway. Ian watched her closely. She didn't hesitate to take advantage of his concern. Not now. You think you can die on me? Ian said sharply, grabbing her chin. I will never let that happen. His grip tightened. If these chains aren't enough, I'll tie down all your limbs to this bed. Rosen frowned. Are you insane? Maybe I am, Ian replied through clenched teeth. But if you try anything again, I won't let it happen. What if I bite my tongue? I'll gag you. Then I'll hold my breath. Stop talking nonsense, Ian snapped, tilting her chin upward. You can't die by holding your breath. His voice dropped, confusion slipping through. I don't understand. He looked at her, searching. You went through all that just to escape prison, so why are you doing this now? Why are you giving up? Rosen's eyes hardened. You have the audacity to ask me that? She shot back. It's because I can't escape, and you're the one who told me that. Her voice rose. You showed me those creatures. You scared me. It was him. He had told her to give up, to accept her sentence. So why was he saying this now? I was just being cautious, Ian said quietly. I never imagined you would do something like this. He paused. I know you're not someone who gives up until your last breath. Rosen stared at him. He knows me? What could he possibly know about her? The Witch of Alcapez. The murderer. You know me? She scoffed. Who are you to say that? Her voice turned sharp. Answer me, Sir Ian Connor. What do you know about me? Ian exhaled slowly. Don't get angry. Of course, I don't know you that well. His hand moved gently, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. But I know more than you think. What are you trying to say? Rosen pressed. I don't understand. Be clear. Ian fell silent. For a moment. Then, in a low whisper, he said, Don't die. Rosen froze. What? Please, Ian added quietly. Promise me you won't do anything like this again. At least, not while we're on this ship. Why should I? Rosen asked coldly. For whom? This is my last chance to mess things up for you. Why would I give that up? Ian didn't deny it. Yes, he said. You won't survive there. You won't be able to escape either. He stepped closer. But listen, I'm going to make you an offer. He reached down and unlocked the cuffs on her wrists, then her legs. Hey, what are you doing? Rosen asked, startled. But Ian ignored her and pulled her up to her feet. For the first time, she felt light, free. I'll let you walk freely in this cabin, he said. Under my watch, it won't be for long. But you'll get proper sleep, good meals. His voice softened slightly. Take this time to look back on your life. He paused. At least until we reach our destination. Promise me, Rosen, you won't try anything like that again. Rosen looked at him. How strange. He wanted her to promise she wouldn't take her own life. And he sounded genuine. What was he trying to do? But for now, she just needed to play along. Okay, she whispered softly. I promise. She didn't have much time anyway. They would reach the Isle of Monte in 3 days, so she had to act. From now on, she would behave like someone who had given up, someone simply enjoying the last bit of freedom she had been granted. And for that, she needed something. Booze, she said lightly. Get me some booze, something strong, and please, I'm dying for a smoke. Ian looked at her. Please, she added, almost playfully. Even a prisoner on death row is granted a final wish, right? Ian let out a quiet sigh. Without a word, he offered her his pack. Rosen took a cigarette and lit it, inhaling slowly. As for alcohol, Ian said, watching her, I'll get it for you tomorrow morning. Sure, she replied, smiling faintly. Smoke drifted into the air as Rosen's mind began to race. After this, he would tell her to sleep. She couldn't let that happen. She needed to keep him talking, to gather more information. But what could she ask without making him suspicious? I have a question, Sir Ian Connor, she said casually. What? He replied. When did you start smoking? It's discouraged among pilots. Toward the end of the war, he answered. What made you start? She asked, keeping her tone light. Ian glanced at her. Why? Is it a problem? No, Rosen shook her head. It just doesn't seem like you. You're a pilot. To her, he belonged in the sky. That was where he shone the brightest. Whenever his aircraft passed overhead, she used to reach up with both hands, as if she could catch it. She never cared whether they won or lost the war. Because she had been too busy, worshipping Ian Connor as he soared through those blue skies. She had fallen in love with that feeling, that sense of freedom he carried with him. Not anymore. And the war is over, Ian answered calmly. Rosen turned toward him. Then why aren't you married? The question caught him off guard. He frowned. That's none of your business. Well, it's not just me, Rosen said lightly. All your fans across the Empire are dying to know. Ian looked away slightly. There's no telling when a pilot might die in war. I'm better off without a family. Rosen tilted her head. So you're saying no soldier should get married? You went to war without even a picture of your sweetheart stitched into your helmet? Ian gave a faint grin. Maybe some do things like that, but not everyone. Rosen blinked. Was it just her imagination, or did he actually smile? You're too dry, she said, half teasing. No offense, but you're very different from what the media made you out to be. I suppose, Ian replied. Did they force you to become the poster child of the war? She asked. Well, someone had to do it, he said simply. Rosen let out a small laugh. It's your fault for being good-looking. Still better than wanting the role and not having the face for it, right? Ian's lips curved slightly. Again. Is it? Rosen blinked once more. He's smiling. But I don't think people need to get married, Ian added. Rosen smiled. If I were you, I'd have at least 3 wives, and honestly, it would be better for a wife to share you than end up with some loser. She giggled softly, then added, more casually. But from experience, I think a woman doesn't really need a man in her life. She paused. Of course, that doesn't mean I killed Hindley. You know that, right? Ian frowned. Don't talk nonsense. The Empire abolished polygamy long ago. Rosen laughed. You really know nothing about real life, do you? That might be true for the rich people like you. But in the countryside, it's common for men to have more than one wife. She tilted her head slightly. Want to know something? Ian remained silent. I was Hindley's other wife. A quiet pause followed. Of course, you didn't know, Rosen added calmly. How could you? I never told anyone. Ian's expression didn't change, but his silence deepened. I think it's time for bed, he said at last. Rosen stood up slowly. Don't you want to know more? She asked. She stepped closer, then, without hesitation, slid onto his lap. Leaning in slightly, she smiled. You see, I can tell you secrets far more entertaining than anything you've read in those newspapers. Ian looked at her. Rosen smiled faintly, thinking her plan was working, but then, I'm not interested in the least, Ian said flatly. Before she could react, he pulled her off and laid her back onto the bed. Rosen lay there, annoyed. That completely failed. But she couldn't just go to sleep like this. She had to keep him talking. Hey, she called out. Aren't you going to cuff me? I can do that before I go to bed, Ian replied calmly. Aren't you going to bed then? She asked. I don't need much sleep. Rosen narrowed her eyes. Don't need much sleep. Or you can't fall asleep. Both, he answered without hesitation. She studied him. He did look tired. After a moment, Ian picked something up and handed it to her. Rosen blinked, then frowned. Hey, I'm not a child. It's a gift from Lila, Ian said simply. Rosen paused. Why didn't you say that earlier? She hugged the toy quietly, then looked down at it. Tell Lila I said thank you, she murmured. Now go to sleep, Ian said. Rosen scoffed lightly. Hey, would you be able to sleep knowing you'll die in 3 days? I can get plenty of sleep. After that, anyway. So what are you planning? Ian asked. Staying awake for 3 nights? Rosen smirked, then her tone shifted slightly. But seriously, don't you want to know the truth? Ian pulled the covers over her. I already know the truth. Now go to... Before he could finish, Rosen grabbed his hand. No. Her grip tightened. I'm going to talk until I fall asleep. I don't care whether you listen or not. She looked at him, her voice quieter now. How a story unfolds depends on who's telling it, doesn't it? So shouldn't at least one person hear my version? Her fingers curled slightly around his hand. I don't care whether you believe me or not. I know you never will. She exhaled softly. But it doesn't matter. It's all in the past now. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. So, please, just listen to my story. I'll start from when I was 15. Until then, my life was rather boring, and this time, Ian didn't interrupt. He listened. Rosen's memories from before the age of 15 were hazy, blurry, but everything traced back to one place, the orphanage in Rearton. She had spent 15 years there, an orphanage where punishment meant being beaten, where no matter how young you were, or how sick, you still had to work to earn your keep. Life was hard, but Rosen never questioned it. She didn't know any better. She simply believed that was how life was for everyone. Until one day, she caught a glimpse of something else. It was a cold day. She had been sent out to do laundry. Snow was falling gently over the city, and it happened to be Valborg's Day. At first, she didn't know what it was, but later she learned Valborg's Day was a night of celebration, held once every year, a festival to honor the birth of the greatest witch in history. Even now, sometimes. Rosen wondered, if I hadn't looked into that window that day, would my life have been different? Maybe she could have lived a dull, quiet life, without hope, but also without despair. That day, she had paused outside a house, and through the window, she saw a family. They were gathered around a table laughing, wearing clean new clothes, eating warm food. She couldn't hear their voices clearly, but she understood. A child received a toy from her father and threw her arms around him happily. "I love you," the father whispered. Rosen couldn't hear it fully, but she read it from his lips. That night, back at the orphanage, she sat there in silence, bewildered. Love. She had always thought those words belonged only in plays or novels. But that wasn't true. People said them in real life, parents to their children, lovers to each other. And suddenly, an unbearable sadness settled inside her, because for the first time she realized no one had ever said those words to her. The night felt colder than ever. She wanted something, anything, to warm her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She had always thought crying was weakness. As a child, the sound of others crying had irritated her, because crying didn't change anything. But now, she understood she had been wrong. They weren't crying because they were weak. They were crying because they had once known warmth, and lost it. And so they were able to recognize what a sad, desolate place they now found themselves in. Unlike them, Rosen had never known that warmth. And that night, she finally understood what that meant. She was alone. On St. Valborg's Day, people lit candles. They prayed to Valborg, the greatest witch, to grant their wishes. That night, Rosen made one too. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Oh, Valborg, please take pity on me. I don't care who it is. Just send someone to hold me. Someone who will tell me they love me and truly mean it." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And if that's too much to ask, it's okay. Even if they don't mean it, I just need someone to wrap me in a warm embrace." "Rosen! Rosen!" a voice called out. Rosen blinked, coming out of her daze, and turned toward it. "Did you call me?" she asked. "Yes," her friend replied, watching her closely. "What's with you these days? Is something wrong?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Or, is it because your birthday is coming up? Girls over the age of 15 have to leave the orphanage, you know." Rosen didn't look up. She continued washing the dishes, her hands moving mechanically. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm sure I'll be sold off as a maid, or as a concubine, and the money will go straight to the headmistress." She paused, then added under her breath, "Better to be a concubine than a maid." Behind her, a few of the other girls began arguing. "A concubine is just at the mercy of her husband," one snapped. "And maids are safe?" another shot back. "They're no better off. They're still at their master's mercy." The voices rose, tension filling the small space. Then suddenly, "Rosen!" a girl rushed in. "The headmistress is calling for you. Someone is here to see you." Rosen turned, startled. "Someone came to see me?" Inside the office, the headmistress sat before a well-dressed man. "Would you mind waiting for a moment?" she asked politely. "She won't be long." "Of course," the man replied with a gentle smile. "It's no trouble at all to wait for a lady." His gaze softened slightly. "I look forward to seeing her up close." Inside the room, Rosen felt restless. Should she wear her best dress? Should she put on some makeup? But if all they wanted was a maid, then there was no point in trying to look pretty. Taking a quiet breath, she finally stepped into the headmistress's office. "Hello?" she greeted softly. "Oh, Rosen, come here, child," the headmistress said with a warm smile. Rosen's eyes shifted toward the man standing nearby. All the girls had been whispering that her future husband would be some old man, but the moment she saw him, her eyes widened. "This is your groom-to-be," the headmistress said, "Mr. Hindley Howers." The man stood up and turned toward her. "Hello, Rosen Walker," he said with a polite smile. Or perhaps I should say, Rosen Howers. Soon to be, at least. Rosen greeted him back, but her mind was still in shock. He was younger, of course older than her, but not old. He looked normal. "Are you certain she's healthy?" Hindley asked, his gaze scanning Rosen. "You see, I need her to give me plenty of children, but she looks rather skinny." "Oh, Mr. Howers," the headmistress chimed in smoothly. "You've already seen her medical records, and, well, that will depend on you now. Dr. Robinson himself vouched for her." Rosen straightened slightly. She smiled brightly, trying her best. If he didn't choose her, she might end up somewhere far worse. Hindley nodded after a moment. "I suppose she'll look better after a proper wash." "All right. I'll take your word for it." "Perfect," the headmistress said quickly. "Please sign here, Mr. Howers." He paid in cash. Rosen sat quietly in her chair, relief slowly settling in. It had worked, and he seemed kind. She felt a small sense of happiness. "Ah, Rosen, could you give me your hand?" Hindley said gently. "Yes," she replied, startled, looking up at him. He took her hand and slipped a ring onto her finger. "It fits just right," he murmured. Rosen stared at it closely. Was this a dream? No, it was real. "You see," Hindley continued, smiling down at her, "I've been watching you for quite some time. You were the one I liked the most out of all the girls here." Then, as if remembering something, he pulled out a small teddy bear and handed it to her. In that moment, Rosen felt certain. Valborg had answered her prayer. She was going to fall in love with this man. And that was how Rosen first met Hindley Howers, and became Rosen Howers. Soon they arrived at Hindley's home. As they stepped inside, Hindley explained calmly, "The first floor is my clinic. The living quarters are upstairs." Rosen looked around quietly. The place felt warm, clean, beautiful. "All of this is for you," Hindley said softly, showing her all the pretty things. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "Do you like it?" he asked. Rosen turned happily and hugged him back. "Yes," she said sincerely. "Thank you, Hindley." And she meant every word. After coming here, she never went hungry again, and she never had to sleep in a cold bed. The nights they spent together were painful for her, but bearable, because she was happy, at least in the beginning. Hindley behaved like a gentleman. Unlike the people at the orphanage, he never beat her, but after a few weeks, he began to show his true colors, and Rosen's happy days came to an end. "Is this it?" Hindley said one morning, staring at the breakfast table with annoyance. "It's the same as yesterday." Rosen froze. He had never spoken like that before. "It's not the same," she tried to explain. But Hindley suddenly stood up and pointed at her temple. "And now you talk back to me?" His voice turned sharp. "When I'm speaking, you listen. Such a worthless woman." His gaze darkened. And for a moment, Rosen couldn't believe what she was hearing. The door slammed shut behind him. Rosen remained standing there silently, unable to process what had just happened, but eventually she forced herself to calm down. Maybe he was just in a bad mood today. She told herself not to cry. She had gone through far worse than this before. It was okay. It wasn't too late yet. Tomorrow, she could start by making something new for him. And if he ever became physical next time, then she had to make sure he would never abandon her. The next day, Rosen prepared a new dish for him. Hindley glanced at the table. Rosen stood nearby anxiously, watching him take a bite. Then he looked up. "Rosen," he called softly. "Come here." Rosen swallowed hard and stepped forward, preparing herself for a strike. But instead, Hindley slowly raised his hand and patted the back of her head. "It tastes good," he murmured. "See? You can do it. So why were you slacking all this time, A faint smile appeared on his lips. "I think you became too comfortable." Then he pulled her into a hug and whispered near her ear, "Never get too comfortable with your husband. You want to end up a lazy old cow, huh?" He chuckled quietly. "I'll let you off this once because I'm still fond of you, so don't make me hate you, okay?" Rosen listened quietly, and after that, her life completely changed. Every dawn she woke up early and started preparing breakfast for him. Then she cleaned the house in between before immediately preparing lunch. While Hindley took his naps, she hurried outside to buy groceries. For some reason, Hindley stayed home all the time, and he still hadn't opened his clinic. Because of that, Rosen barely had any time to rest. But despite all her effort, after only 2 months, she ran out of new recipes. Around that time, she began having nightmares, dreams where Hindley grew furious, beat her, and sent her back to the orphanage. One day, she carefully asked, "Hindley, when are you going to open the clinic?" "Soon," he answered shortly. "But why did you close it?" Hindley slowly looked up. "That's none of your business." The slap came suddenly across her cheek. "I warned you, Rosen," he said coldly. "I hate noisy women." Rosen immediately apologized. Things were becoming harder. He had isolated her from everything in this unfamiliar place. For some reason, he even forbade her from speaking to the neighbors. So in the end, she had no one else but him. Rosen tried her best not to lose his affection. She stayed quiet, stopped asking questions, and simply did as she was told. But even that fragile peace shattered forever, only 3 months after she moved in with him. Because one day, a strange woman arrived at their door. "So that woman, Emily, was she the first wife?" Ian asked. Rosen looked at him in surprise. It was unexpected. He was actually curious enough to ask something. A small smirk appeared on her lips. "What do you think?" she teased, lightly. "Take a guess." Ian stared at her calmly. "You said all I had to do was listen," he reminded her. Rosen laughed softly. "That was then." She tilted her head slightly. "But were you always like this? Back in the academy too?" "If you're done with your story, go to bed," Ian said firmly. Okay. "No need to be grumpy," Rosen murmured. "Anyway, I already know the answer. I'm sure you had that same sullen expression back then, too. Honestly, I'm surprised Henry hasn't run away from you by now." Ian quietly listened. Then, without meaning to, his thoughts drifted back to when he was young. What was he like back then? He remembered the day he left for military school. His caretaker, Rosalie, had looked worried. But Ian had been strangely happy. "It's okay, Rosalie," young Ian had said calmly before leaving. "I'll finally be able to get some peace. Take care of yourself." At least there, his relatives would no longer drag him into their unpleasant affairs. "Hi, is this seat free?" Ian looked up. A girl stood there, smiling brightly. Without waiting for an answer, she sat beside him. "I'm Illyria," she said cheerfully, "but you can call me Rhea. What's your name?" "Ian Connor," he replied calmly. The girl's eyes widened with excitement. "Oh, I heard you ranked first in the exams. That's so cool." She grinned brightly. "Let's be friends." Ian slowly nodded. She was far too talkative. He already had a feeling she would make concentrating in class difficult. Still, whenever Rhea saw him, she always called out to him first. And Ian, no matter how hesitant, always greeted her back. One day after class, Rhea ran up to him again. "Ian, if you're done, want to come play cards with us?" "No," Ian answered immediately. "I still have a book to finish." He turned and walked away. Behind him, another girl whispered to Rhea, "Why do you even bother with him? He acts like he's above everyone. He clearly doesn't want to be friends with us." But Rhea only watched Ian's back quietly as he left. Ian sat alone in the library later that evening. For him, there was no time for games. He had to work harder. Then suddenly, He looked up in surprise. Rhea had sat down across from him again. "Don't worry," she said quickly. "I won't disturb you. I'm here to study for the test." Ian stared at her for a moment. "I thought you hated me," he said bluntly. Rhea blinked. "Oh, so you heard that. I thought you didn't care." Then she leaned forward slightly. "They just don't know you. Honestly, I don't know you either, but even though you look arrogant and unfriendly and don't exactly fit in, you always say hi when I call you, and you work harder than everyone else, in classes, training, everything, so I'd like to get to know you better." She tilted her head. "How about it?" For the first time, a faint grin appeared on Ian's face, and that was how Ian Connor made his first friend, Elitia Reve, the girl who would later become a member of his aviation corps. Several years later, a new junior arrived at the academy. He was the son of a famous war hero, Henry Revel. "Hey Ian, have you seen who you got paired with?" Rhea asked curiously. "Are you really okay being his mentor?" Ian looked back at her calmly. "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "Well, he's famous," Rhea replied, "and you have to share a room with him too. We don't even know what he's like." Just then, the dorm room door opened. "Excuse me, is this room 1053? Ian nodded. The boy stepped inside confidently. "Hi, I'm Henry Revel. Nice to meet you." He offered his hand. Ian looked at him quietly before taking it. "Ian Connor," he replied with a small smile. "Nice to meet you." And that day, Ian made what was kind of his second friend. That night, Henry lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. His new roommate had guided him around the academy and explained everything in perfect detail, but honestly, Ian Connor was such a bore, a complete nerd. Still, since Ian was his mentor, things would probably be easy for him now. So Henry decided there was nothing to worry about. At least, that was what he thought. The next morning, training began. Henry completed his run in 12 seconds. Of course, he hadn't used his full stamina. No point showing off too much. But Ian Connor was not someone easy to fool. "Judging by your height and entrance records," Ian said calmly, "you didn't give it your all. Am I wrong?" And just like that, Henry was forced to run again. And again, and again. What is this guy's deal? Henry thought bitterly. No matter what he did, Ian always found another reason to make him continue. Only now did Henry finally understand why everyone had pitied him when they found out Ian Connor would be his mentor. "Oh my God," Henry groaned internally. "Am I going to train like this every single day?" Just imagining it gave him chills. One night, Henry finally decided he had enough. Training at 5 in the morning? Ridiculous. Smirking to himself, he quietly snuck out of the room. "Let's see you find me now." Then suddenly, "Henry," Ian's voice came from behind him. "It's not 5 in the morning yet." And that night, the entire dormitory heard Henry scream. The next morning, Henry once again collapsed onto the ground after training, panting heavily. Rhea approached with a grin. "Is Ian being too tough? Our precious Master Revel must be exhausted." Henry slowly sat up. "What do you even know about me?" he snapped suddenly. "You think I've had an easy life just because I'm the son of a war hero?" His fists clenched. "Everyone's always watching me, waiting for me to make one mistake so they can judge me. I'm always in the spotlight. If I show everyone everything I've got now, then what will I have left to prove later?" A brief silence followed. Then Henry sighed awkwardly. "Well, maybe I shouldn't have said all that. Sorry." He stood up and walked away. Rhea quietly watched his back. For a moment, he reminded her of someone she knew. Meanwhile, Henry was dying inside from embarrassment. What was I even saying? What if Rhea told Ian Connor everything? As he walked through the academy grounds, a few classmates approached him. "Hey, want to come with us?" They were planning to sneak out. Henry had no interest and immediately refused. But one of the boys grabbed his wrist. "Oh, come on. It'll be fun." Henry pulled his hand away quickly, accidentally scratching the boy's arm in the process. "I'm sorry," Henry said immediately. "I didn't mean to," but the boy scoffed. "You think you're special or something? We only invited you because of your father." His expression twisted mockingly. "Let's see what happens once rumors spread about the great war hero's son being a bully." Nearby, Ian happened to be passing by and overheard the conversation. Henry stayed silent, until the boy smirked and added, "Wouldn't everyone love to see your father begging for forgiveness?" Before he could finish, Henry punched him. He was already furious at himself, and those words only pushed him over the edge. Did you really do this, young Master Connor?" The principal looked at Ian from across the desk. Ian sat calmly in front of him. "Yes, sir," he replied without hesitation. The principal sighed heavily. "So you are saying you started the fight, and young Master Revel was merely trying to stop it?" "Yes, sir. You understand you cannot escape punishment for this, correct?" the principal asked again. Ian's answer remained the same. "Yes, sir." The principal rubbed his forehead in exhaustion before finally speaking. "You are suspended for 1 week, young Master Connor." Ian simply nodded and stood up to leave, but just before he stepped, the principal spoke again. "And young Master Connor," Ian paused. "I assure you we will not overlook this kind of behavior next time. I hope Master Revel understands that as well." Ian quietly nodded before leaving the office. Outside, Henry was waiting anxiously. Ian approached him calmly. "Cool off for a bit," he said, "and finish your assigned chores. Why did you do that? Henry asked in frustration. Why get yourself suspended? He ran a hand through his hair. And how did you even pull this off? Normally, they would have called everyone's parents. Ian sighed lightly. I spoke to the boys first, he explained. They've sneaked out before too, so they were already scared of their parents finding out. Then he added calmly, and as for me, I don't have any parents to call. Henry froze slightly. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Ian turned away. Let's go, he said quietly. And be more careful from now on. Henry followed behind him silently before finally muttering, I thought you hated me, for being the arrogant son of a war hero or whatever. Ian glanced back at him. At least you know you're arrogant, he replied calmly. But, Ian continued, that's not a reason to hate you. Maybe you thought that because of the training. But I was only making you do what I do. His voice remained steady. Being easy on you won't help you. Once you enter this academy, no matter how young you are, you're training to become a soldier. So that's how I see you, as a soldier. A quiet silence followed before Ian spoke again. There's no telling when war will break out. His expression darkened slightly. And when we're on the front lines, if you don't give your all, you'll die. So for me, Ian continued quietly, it doesn't matter what other people think. I just don't want to see anyone I care about die. And after that day, Henry became inseparable from Ian. Almost like a younger brother following him everywhere. After a few years, the war finally broke out. And despite being so young, Ian was assigned his very first mission as commander. Commander Connor! Henry called out from behind and hurried toward him holding a newspaper. Did you see the announcement? He looked shocked. Well, congratulations, I guess, he muttered. But they seriously must have lost their minds. You're barely 20. The Air Force is always lacking personnel, Ian replied calmly. So focus on your training. It could be your turn any time now. Henry sighed dramatically. I'll become top of the school once you're gone. Then his voice slowly lowered. Just don't die. Ian looked at him quietly. And make sure to tell Lieutenant Illyria too, Henry added awkwardly. As you said, I also don't want to see anyone I care about die. His expression turned unusually serious. So don't you dare go dying on me. Ian stared at him for a moment, then slowly nodded. Ian Connor. Rosen's voice pulled Ian out of his thoughts. Ian looked up slightly startled. What were you thinking about? Rosen asked, resting her chin on her hand. You completely blanked out for a moment there. Ian sighed quietly. Nothing. If you're done for today, go to sleep. Rosen smirked immediately. I'm not even slightly sleepy. And now that you're back, listen to the rest of my story. Even though you still won't tell me yours. Then she tilted her head. You asked me about Emily, right? One morning, Rosen heard loud knocking at the door. She hurried to open it, only to find a young woman standing outside. Emily stared at her in confusion. Rosen was around her age. Who are you? Emily asked immediately. I'm Mrs. Howers, Rosen replied politely. For a moment, Emily froze. Then anger suddenly rushed across her face as she pushed past Rosen and entered the house. Wait! Rosen tried to stop her, but before she could, Hindley stepped out from inside. What is going on? He asked irritably. Something suddenly flew toward him. Are you insane? Emily shouted furiously. Have you completely lost your mind? Her voice trembled with rage. Taking a new wife while your old wife is still alive and well? And she's just a child at that. Rosen froze. That was the moment. She found out she was Hindley's second wife. Hindley? Rosen asked slowly, unable to process what she was hearing. What is she talking about? But instead of looking guilty, Hindley simply smiled casually. Well, he said calmly, I never thought I'd be introducing you two like this. Then he turned toward Emily. Say hello, Rosen. This is my daughter, Emily. So to tell you the story, a long time ago, a man and a woman fell in love. They were both young and loved each other dearly. However, there was one thing unusual about them. The woman was able to wield magic. You see, she was a witch. Most people feared witches and shunned them, but the man did not fear her. Instead, he praised her for her power and whispered to her that it made her special. He even gave her a beautiful pendant for her to wear around her neck. You might put yourself in danger if you can't control your magic, so wear this necklace at all times. Those were the sweet words the man whispered to her. The woman deeply loved the man who had accepted her for who she was, so she did everything he asked of her. Soon they were married, and the man opened a clinic using her powers. Although he lacked proper medicinal knowledge, her potions were extremely effective, so the clinic became crowded with patients every single day. The young couple soon amassed a small fortune in that little village. However, as the man grew richer, she only grew weaker. As time passed, the woman gave birth to a daughter, but the happiness lasted only a short while. The woman's health began to deteriorate after giving birth, and her powers weakened along with it. And that was when the man finally showed his true colors. He began abusing her, beating her, treating her cruelly. One day, the woman simply could not endure it any longer, so she ran away, taking her daughter with her. But she was weak, battling illness, and with her magic bound to the man through that pendant, she could not go very far. Before long, the man found them. In an effort to protect her ailing mother, the daughter tried to attack the man using the very magic she had inherited from her mother, and once the man realized his daughter was also capable of magic, he made her a proposal. If she helped him, he would let them live peacefully, and even help pay for her mother's medicine. The young daughter, desperate for money and wanting to save her mother, accepted the deal, and as instructed, she placed her mother's pendant around her own neck. Her mother, far too ill to understand what was happening around her, was unable to warn her daughter that she must never wear that pendant. Now sitting across from Hindley, Emily finally asked, "Tell me now. Who is this girl?" Hindley sighed irritably. "She's my second wife. Is that really so hard to understand?" Emily immediately stood up and slammed her fist onto the table. "You drained your first wife's power, beat her until she became bedridden, and now you have the audacity to take a second wife?" Her eyes trembled with fury. "How dare you!" Emily reached forward to grab his collar, but Hindley remained seated, calmly smiling faintly. Then suddenly, Emily flinched sharply, clutching at her neck. "Emily, my daughter," Hindley said quietly as he stood up. "Being my daughter, why are you so stupid, Emily stood there gripping her throat painfully. "It's about time you learned something." He stepped closer. "All this talking back to me, it only ends up hurting yourself." Outside the room, Rosen sat frozen, hearing the sharp slapping sounds from inside. She quietly covered her ears. Later that night, Rosen carefully opened the door to Emily's room. Emily immediately looked up in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Rosen didn't answer immediately. She simply walked inside, carrying medicine in her hands. "I'll leave this. Here," she said quietly. "Use it for your wounds." Emily sat there silently before clenching her teeth. "You're just as crazy as him," she said bitterly. Rosen looked at her quietly. "If you weren't," Emily continued angrily, "then how could you even marry an old man like that? You must be out of your mind." Her voice turned mocking. "What did he promise you? Jewelry? Whatever it was, you're no different from him. It disgusts me." Rosen's fist slowly tightened. "What do you even know about me?" she asked sharply. Emily frowned. "Do you have any idea what kind of life I had?" Rosen's voice trembled slightly as she continued. "I never knew my parents. I was abused in an orphanage. I worked like a maid every single day while worrying I might be sold off somewhere even worse. We slept like rats in freezing cold rooms. And every time I found something to eat, even stale bread, I was grateful for it." Rosen looked directly at Emily. "Do you really think I ever had a choice?" Then she slowly turned away. "It's true that I don't know about your past, but you have no right to treat me like that. You at least had a family growing up." And with those final words, Rosen quietly left the room. The next morning, Rosen felt uneasy. Last night, she had spoken her mind to Emily without holding back, but now worry slowly crept into her chest. What if Emily told everything to Hindley? "Good morning, Rosen." Startled, Rosen turned around as Hindley wrapped his arms around her from behind. Good morning." Then she hesitated before asking carefully, Where is Emily? Why do you ask?" Hindley asked casually as he sat down on the chair. Rosen lowered her gaze slightly. "Maybe she's still sleeping after all the beating I gave her last night." He sighed dramatically. "Sorry about that. You see, I didn't intend to go that far, but it couldn't be helped. That foolish girl tried to use magic on me." "Magic?" Rosen whispered in surprise. "Oh, you didn't know?" Hindley replied calmly. "She's a witch. She inherited it from her mother." Then he smiled faintly. "But did you notice the pendant around her neck?" Rosen slowly nodded. "I gave it to her because she can't control her own powers. If she takes it off," his eyes met hers, "she'll die." Then he quickly added with a gentle smile, "Oh, don't misunderstand, it's all for her own good." Rosen had only ever heard stories about witches and fairy tales, so hearing all this directly felt overwhelming. Hindley slowly offered his hand toward her. "But don't worry," he whispered softly. "You're a good girl. You're no danger to anyone." Rosen forced herself to calm down and gently grabbed his hand. "Yes, Hindley. I'm no danger to anyone." Hindley nodded in satisfaction before pulling her into his arms. "Yes," he murmured softly, "you're everything to me now. And honestly..." Rosen liked Hindley. At the very least, he complimented her, patted her head, and held her warmly in his arms. Of course, life with him wasn't all roses, but at least it was warm. Then Hindley suddenly informed her, "Emily is going to stay with us from now on. She has to work to pay for her mother's medicine." "But why?" Rosen argued lightly. "She said so many awful things to me." Hindley chuckled softly. "She's a little aggressive, but deep down she's soft." Then he leaned closer toward Rosen's ear. "And honestly, be grateful it's her instead of her mother, otherwise this house would become complete chaos." A faint grin appeared on his lips. "Though, it might have been entertaining watching my wives grow jealous of each other." Rosen flinched slightly. Jealous? Was she? But wasn't jealousy something people felt when they feared losing someone they loved? Rosen wasn't afraid of losing Hindley. She was only afraid of losing the home she had finally found. The four walls that protected her from the cold rain, the full pantry, the warm bed. But not Hindley. So there was no reason for her to dislike Emily, or Emily's mother. Inside the kitchen, Rosen noticed a plate of sandwiches sitting on the table. They were supposedly prepared by Emily. "Why did you make sandwiches for me?" Rosen asked curiously. Outside in the garden, Emily was sorting clothes to dry under the sun. "It was just leftovers," Emily muttered quietly. "But don't you hate me, Emily?" Rosen asked, following after her. "You were furious at me the other night, and now you're making me sandwiches?" She tilted her head slightly. Are you feeling guilty? It was for Hindley, Emily answered flatly. Rosen smiled knowingly. Oh, don't lie now. Anyway, I can't eat them. Hindley doesn't want me gaining weight. Emily immediately turned irritated. That's complete nonsense, she snapped. He eats like a pig and lounges around all day. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Then suddenly, remembering something, she asked eagerly, Emily, are you really a witch? Emily stared at her for a moment before quietly answering, yes. Rosen's face instantly brightened. That's so cool! But then why are you working here? She asked excitedly. Couldn't you just use magic? Emily looked at her silently before turning away. Stop talking nonsense and help me with the laundry. Rosen had finally met a real witch, but somehow it felt disappointing. In fairy tales, witches could do anything. They could fly, destroy everything they hated, change the world using magic. So had the great witch Valborg lost all her power over time? Rosen wondered about that quietly, because after all those desperate prayers to Valborg, all she received in the end was Hindley. Rosen sighed softly as she stood there. I guess it's not that great after all, she murmured. All it takes is a little necklace to stop you from using magic? Emily stayed silent for a moment before whispering quietly, I can still do some simple magic. Really? Rosen's eyes sparkled immediately. Then show me, please. She looked genuinely excited. Emily turned toward her in surprise. Why do you even want to see it? She asked quietly. I'm a witch. People are always afraid of me. That's the only reason I'm still staying with Hindley. She sighed bitterly. He annoys me like hell, but without his protection, what would happen to me and my mother? It doesn't matter whether war breaks out or not. The two of us can't survive alone. Emily looked away. Being a witch is a curse. Are you kidding me? Rosen immediately argued. It's magic. How could that ever be a curse? Then she clasped her hands together eagerly. Please, Emily, just show me once. Emily let out a tired sigh before slowly raising her hand, and in the next second, the water suddenly floated into the air. Rosen froze. What Emily showed her that day was the most magnificent thing Rosen had ever seen in her entire life. For that brief moment, she forgot everything. All her pain, Hindley, being trapped inside that house like a prisoner, even the loneliness that made her cry at night. And for the first time in a long while, Rosen felt certain she would finally have pleasant dreams tonight. But that very night, the sirens throughout the city suddenly went off. Rosen and Emily rushed out of their rooms in panic. Was that an explosion? Rosen asked nervously. Hindley still hadn't returned home. He had gone out earlier to buy supplies and never came back. The two hurried downstairs and quickly turned on the radio. Then, a young man's voice rang through the broadcast. People of the Empire and the people of Ryerton, this is the commander of the Ryerton Aviation Corps, Ian Connor. This is an air raid warning for the entire Ryerton region. This is not a drill. The Thalys aircraft are flying toward Ryerton at this very moment. Close your doors, gather your valuables, and head underground immediately. We are doing everything we can to keep you safe. Do not panic. I repeat, this is not a drill. This is an air raid warning for the entire Ryerton region. Everyone must take shelter underground. We are doing everything possible to protect you, and we will protect you with whatever it takes. Ian looked at the sleeping woman quietly. She had finally drifted off to sleep, even though she kept insisting she wouldn't fall asleep and continued talking endlessly. In the condition she was in, there was no way she could steal the keys from him. Honestly, Ian was surprised she had managed to stay awake and keep talking for that long. Then he felt her grip tighten slightly around his hand. In her sleep, Rosen murmured softly, I'm still awake, and it's just that I wanted to be loved. Ian flinched slightly at those words, but he quickly reminded himself there was only one reason she was telling him all of this. To convince him once again that she didn't do it, and he must not fall for it, because according to every report written about her, Rosen Walker was an artful and persuasive scammer, highly intelligent, dangerous. Must be careful not to be deceived when engaging in conversation. That was what every report warned him about. But then, why had she never told anyone this story before? If she had explained all this during the trial, no. Ian's eyes lowered quietly. Actually, it probably would have only convinced people even more of her guilt. Nothing would have changed except the added detail that the murder had been caused by abuse. And after everything she had suffered, how could she still consider him a hero? A man who failed to protect their hometown. Slowly, Ian slipped his hand free from hers, assuming she had fully fallen asleep now. Then he sat quietly beside the bed. He looked at her for a moment. Even sleeping on such a large, soft bed, she still looked uncomfortable. The sight strangely irritated him. She wasn't even cuffed anymore, so why was she still sleeping like that? Slowly, he reached out and checked her breathing. It was calm and steady, so she hadn't lied when she said she felt better. Still, he knew she would never survive long on the Isle of Monte. If she was going to die there in just a few days anyway, then Ian saw no problem in uncuffing her for now. After all, prisoners on death row were often granted final wishes too. This was simply another form of generosity. He only needed to keep her alive until they arrived at the Isle. That was his duty. But if he was truly honest with himself, was duty really his only reason? Ian slowly brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. I shouldn't have taken this job, he murmured quietly. because regardless of what everyone else in the Empire said, if there was one man who genuinely wanted to set Rosen Walker free, it was him. "What am I supposed to do with you, he whispered softly. It would have been much easier if he had simply been fooled by her lies. Or perhaps they should have never met in the first place. Ian slowly stood up, grabbing the cuff chains from the side. Then he glanced back at the sleeping Rosen. Deep down, he already knew this would happen the moment he first laid eyes on her. "Sir Ian Connor!" Henry's frantic voice suddenly pulled Ian awake. Ian slowly opened his eyes and looked toward Henry. But why did he look so horrified? And what was he even doing in the room in the middle of the night? Wait. Ian glanced toward the window. Morning light was already shining through. "When did I fall asleep?" "What time is it, Henry?" Ian asked groggily. Henry stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously worried about that right now?" he snapped. "That should be the least of your concern." "What are you even talking about?" Ian said irritably before his words suddenly trailed off. A strange tightness wrapped around his waist, his eyes slowly lowered, and widened instantly. A woman was sleeping peacefully against him, her arms tightly wrapped around his waist. The very cuffs he had picked up earlier were now locked shut, one around Rosen's wrist and the other around his own, meaning technically, Sir Ian Connor had spent the night sleeping handcuffed to his prisoner. "Did something happen last night?" "What on earth did you do?" Henry's frantic voice echoed through the room. "No. Nothing," Ian replied hesitantly. "Then tell me what this is supposed to mean?" Henry demanded, pointing directly at the bed. His face looked completely horrified. "Are you seriously saying she just crawled into your bed without your knowledge?" Ian sighed and rubbed his forehead tiredly. Why had he fallen asleep here of all places, and like this too? "It's her bed," he muttered quietly. Then he glanced at Henry coldly. "And stop yelling, she's asleep." Henry looked even more shocked. "Please don't tell me this is what I think it is," he whispered dramatically. "Please, say something. Relax," Ian answered immediately. "It's nothing like what you're thinking." Then he added flatly, "And as you can see, we're both fully dressed." After saying that, Ian suddenly looked back at Henry. "And why are you here anyway? Didn't I tell you you're not allowed around her?" Henry scoffed loudly. "Like you have any right to say that right now." He pointed at Ian accusingly. "You're the last person who should be accusing me of anything. You're the one caught in bed with a prisoner." His expression twisted in disbelief. "What happened to the Ian Connor I know?" Ian stayed silent as he slowly unlocked the cuffs. Henry immediately noticed. "And what's with the cuffs?" he asked, completely confused. "Why did you cuff yourself to her? And why are you even unlocking them now?" Ian ruffled his hair in annoyance before taking a drag from his cigarette. "No reason," he answered calmly. "I'm just keeping watch." But Henry clearly wasn't satisfied with that answer. He grabbed the cuffs, preparing to lock them back onto Rosen again, when Ian's cold voice suddenly stopped him. "Henry." Ian looked directly at him. "Put those down." Henry stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously planning to keep her uncuffed? Have you completely lost your mind?" Ian took another slow drag before answering calmly. "She attempted suicide, and I have to keep her alive until we reach the Isle. So I told her not to try anything again, and she agreed. But in exchange, I promised to keep the cuffs off, and she promised to stay put." Henry looked absolutely unconvinced. "And you trust her? And how could she even hurt herself while wearing cuffs anyway?" "No," Ian answered bluntly. "I don't trust her." Then his expression darkened slightly. "But she's unpredictable. Yesterday we were only supposed to have dinner, right? Yet even with her hands cuffed." Ian slowly looked toward Rosen sleeping peacefully on the bed. "Did you already forget what happened?" Henry quietly lowered his gaze. After all, Rosen had specifically asked him for the Maria fruit, and Ian knew Henry still felt guilty about that. Finally, Ian broke the silence. "Anyway, why were you here?" Henry quickly remembered why he had come. "Oh, right. The captain said a school of magical sea monsters is crossing our path. Apparently there are a lot of them. They usually avoid large ships like this, but in the worst-case scenario, we might have to divert course." He sighed. "So we could arrive 1 or 2 days later than expected. The captain asked me to inform you so you could notify higher-ups." "I see," Ian answered quietly. Then he turned back toward Henry. "You can leave now if there's nothing else." Henry narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Are you sure I can leave the two of you alone together?" "Enough with the nonsense," Ian replied immediately. Only then did Henry finally leave the room. The cabin became quiet again. Ian slowly turned and looked at Rosen sleeping peacefully on the bed. If they arrived later than expected, then Rosen would have 1 or 2 extra days before reaching the Isle of Monte. Ian sighed heavily before sitting down on the floor beside the bed. Henry was right. He really must have lost his damn mind. Rosen, now awake, looked out the window. Just a moment ago the weather had been beautiful, but now heavy rain poured endlessly outside. Then her eyes shifted to the front of the room, and her brows immediately frowned, seeing the unwanted guest sitting there. Henry sat across from her calmly playing chess by himself. He moved another piece, and won again. Rosen stared at the board irritably before suddenly kicking it over with her foot. "Hey, what are you doing?" Henry shouted. Rosen glared at the overturned board in annoyance. Henry had brought this dumb game rich people played, and she didn't even understand the rules. It was unbelievably irritating. "You can leave now," she said coldly. "I want to rest." Henry glared back immediately. I'm not leaving you two alone together." Rosen's brows furrowed deeper. But it's so stuffy in here with this many people. Honestly, she couldn't even understand why Henry kept glaring at her so suspiciously. Meanwhile, his boss sat nearby silently reading a newspaper without even looking at her once. And it wasn't even today's newspaper. It was several days old. So why was he still reading it so seriously? Something was definitely strange today. That morning, Henry had arrived with breakfast, insisting he would eat together with them. Then afterward, he even brought this stupid chess game, saying he wanted to play with Rosen. What exactly is wrong with him? Rosen wondered irritably. Is this some new way to torture me? Henry sighed heavily. Sorry, but I'm not leaving this room. How could I possibly leave you alone with Sir Connor? Rosen looked at him sharply. What are you even talking about? And since when do you not trust your own boss? Henry slowly looked up. I did, until yesterday, but not anymore. Rosen frowned in confusion. What, did these two get into some kind of fight? But if they did, shouldn't they solve it themselves? Why drag her into it? Finally, Rosen let out a tired sigh. Look, it's really stuffy in here. Can I at least go out? Onto the deck for some fresh air? No, Henry answered immediately. It's raining outside. You could slip. Oh, please, Rosen whined dramatically, making a fake sobbing face. Henry scoffed loudly. Tears again? Seriously? Man, you're unbelievable. And what if someone recognizes you? Rosen winked playfully. Please, just for a little while. I promise I'll stay hidden. Henry's face only grew darker. When you asked for the Maria fruit, you also promised you wouldn't cause trouble. Then what happened? You collapsed, coughing blood. And now you expect me to trust you again? Rosen awkwardly rubbed the back of her neck. I'm done lying around, okay? And I promise, Sir Connor. Lies, Henry answered immediately. You tried to kill yourself. Rosen looked startled for a second. Then she slowly smiled. That's strange. I thought you wanted me dead. I figured you'd be happy to see me gone. Henry slowly looked up at her, his face suddenly pale. Then he lowered his gaze quietly. I've already killed enough people during the war. I don't want any more deaths on my hands. Rosen stared at him silently. Why was he making that kind of face? For a brief moment, she almost felt guilty. Should she apologize? No. Why should she? Cut the bullshit and let me out, she snapped sharply. A troubled Henry finally turned toward Ian. Sir Connor, the final decision is yours. Please choose wisely. Remember, she's capable of anything. For the first time in a while, Ian finally spoke. Henry, go fetch some alcohol. She said yesterday that she wanted a drink. Henry immediately sighed in annoyance, but eventually he stood up anyway. I won't take long, he muttered before leaving the room. Rosen looked at the shut door after Henry left. What's wrong with him today? She muttered irritably. It's just how he is, Ian calmly replied. He's like an untamed foal, so I have to keep him in line. Then, after a brief pause, he quietly added, after losing everyone, he's all I have left. Rosen looked at Ian silently for a moment before slowly stepping closer. Now that I think about it, this is unfair, she said. You've read all those newspaper articles about me. But I know absolutely nothing about you. She leaned slightly against the table. I can't even read properly, so all I could do was stare at your pictures. A small smile appeared on her lips. So the only things I know are that you're handsome and that you're a pilot. And honestly, that sucks. She stepped even closer, but Ian still kept his eyes on the newspaper. Seeing that, Rosen decided to try something else. Lightly tapping her foot against his shoe, she reached forward and pulled the newspaper down. Come on now, she complained. It's old. You already read it, so put it down and play with me. Ian finally looked up at her. Play with you, he repeated slowly. What exactly are you suggesting? Rosen smiled immediately. Last night she had learned one more thing about Ian Connor. No matter how cold or gruff he acted, he couldn't refuse her when she pestered him like a child. So Rosen quickly took advantage of that. She climbed onto the table right on top of the newspaper Ian had been reading. Then slowly, she reached out and lightly tapped his nose with her finger. You see, I like things to be fair, she said playfully. So let's start with basic personal information. She tilted her head. First question, how old are you exactly? Ian frowned slightly, but still answered. 30. Rosen's eyes widened. Then how old were you when you were first appointed commander? The war began 10 years ago, Ian answered calmly. So do the math. Rosen blinked in shock. At 20, that's way too young. Ian quietly met her gaze. The higher-ups ran off. That only left me. The Air Force was already short on pilots because the few properly trained ones we had were dispatched to the capital. So the only people left in Riorton were U.S. cadets. They simply chose the best among us. My first flying corps consisted of 4 people, Illyria Lev, Violet Mihak, and Lucy Watkins. He paused briefly. And after we lost them in battle, Henry Reville, Sarah Riveren, and Mikhail Johnson. Rosen stared at him quietly. There were women in the Air Force? She asked in surprise. Yes, Ian answered immediately. Quite a lot, actually. There were many women participating in dangerous new fields during the war. They've just been forgotten. Then he sighed softly, almost as if realizing too late that he had spoken too much. Anyway, forget that. I shouldn't have said all this. Rosen silently looked at him. What the Empire had done truly was insane. They had thrown young cadets, children who had barely learned how to fly, straight into war. The famous Ryerton Flying Corps that people placed all their faith in were nothing more than students, and when they survived far longer than expected, the government simply turned Ian Connor into propaganda. For the first time, Rosen truly realized something. They had all been far too young to survive 10 years of war. I'm sorry for insulting your comrades before, Rosen said quietly. Like you said, I was only thinking about myself. Ian looked up at her. No, he answered after a moment. I was the one who spoke without thinking, so I should be the one apologizing. Rosen pressed her foot lightly against his again and smiled. You overthink too much. That's why you can't sleep. She tilted her head slightly. I'm just a mere prisoner. You don't have to apologize to me. Try loosening up a little more like I do. I only think about the immediate future. Ian quietly stared at her. Why are you saying this to me? He asked softly. Rosen smiled at him. Because I like you, so I want you to be happy. Isn't that what liking someone is about? Ian's gaze slowly lowered. Don't say things like that, he murmured. Like what? Rosen asked innocently. That you like me. Rosen suddenly leaned closer toward him. What? She whispered. Does that upset you? Ian stiffened slightly at the sudden closeness before quietly answering. No, that's not what I mean. He hesitated briefly. It's just, I don't deserve to hear those words from you. But answer my question. Rosen pressed again softly. Does it upset you? Ian sighed quietly. No. It just makes me uneasy, and I think you've forgotten what kind of situation we're in. Rosen looked directly into his face, and before even thinking, she leaned forward slightly and brushed her lips softly against his cheek. The sudden closeness startled even her. Did I go too far? With a faint blush, she instinctively pulled back a little, preparing to apologize. But when she looked at Ian, he simply looked startled. Slowly, he raised his hand to his cheek, lightly touching the warmth her lips had left behind. Rosen swallowed quietly. That was strange. He wasn't angry, he wasn't yelling, and more importantly, he wasn't pushing her away either. Gathering her courage again, Rosen slowly raised her hand and gently touched his face, his cheek, the edge of his lips. She kept telling herself she was only trying to seduce him, that none of this meant anything to her. And yet, for some reason, she couldn't take her eyes or hands off him. Suddenly, her wrist was caught by a larger hand. Rosen flinched and looked up into Ian's eyes. What are you doing? Ian asked quietly. Rosen laughed awkwardly, her cheeks faintly red. Oh, sorry, forget it. I wasn't trying anything weird. She looked away briefly before murmuring softly. It's just that I wanted to touch you. You look exactly like you did in those flyers. I almost couldn't believe you were real. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Well, at least you fulfilled one of my dying wishes. Dying wish? Ian repeated in confusion. Yes. My husband used to get really jealous of you. You see, I had a huge crush on you back then, so I hung your flyers all over the house, and that pissed him off. Rosen smiled bitterly. He screamed at me, saying a pathetic little thing like me could never even dream of getting close to someone like you. Then he beat me for it. She laughed quietly to herself. Life really is funny, isn't it? Look where I am now. It still doesn't feel real. I can't believe I'm actually sitting here in front of the great Ian Connor, touching you like this. As she spoke, her voice slowly trailed off because the hand that had caught her wrist earlier was now gently wrapped around her cheek instead. Rosen looked startled, but Ian didn't pull away. He quietly held her gaze, his hand slowly moving across her face, her cheek, her lips, her eyes. Hey, what are you? Rosen tried to speak, her face growing warmer. Ian's lips slowly parted, his gaze still fixed on her. But before he could finish, the door suddenly swung open. Rosen! Little Lila rushed inside excitedly. Are you feeling better now? Behind her, Henry sighed. I bumped into her and she insisted on coming, wouldn't take no for an answer. Then his gaze drifted to the two inside the cabin. What happened? He asked. Ian sat reading a newspaper. Rosen lay on the bed. Nothing, they both answered, a little too quickly, a little too awkwardly. Anyway, it's all right if Lila stays, isn't it? Henry said. But before anyone could reply, Lila had already dashed to Rosen's side, throwing her arms around her in delight. Rosen, are you all right now? She asked, beaming. Rosen looked at her, and for a moment couldn't find the words. She knew how terrified the child must have been that day, seeing her in such a state, but at least now Lila wasn't frightened of her. Without quite meaning to, she raised a hand and patted the girl's cheek. So soft, so warm. It had been days since she'd been allowed to touch another person freely like this. Her eyes wandered to the man sitting quietly in the chair with his newspaper. Was that the same reason she had touched him too? She wondered. Rosen, does Ian take your cuffs off? Lila asked. Rosen smiled. Yes, he gave me special permission. Wow, that's so cool. Then we can go to the party together. Rosen blinked. Party? Yes, there's a party on the deck tonight. You can be my guest this time. Slowly, Rosen's mind began to piece things together. Confined to this cabin, she might never have the chance to retrieve that key, and she still needed to learn where the lifeboat was kept. But would it even be possible for her to attend a party? Rosen, it's the night of Walpurgis, Lila chimed in. Rosen faltered. She had been imprisoned so long that she hadn't even realized the night had come around again. The night of Walpurgis was celebrated across the entire empire. The passengers of this ship were certain to have a splendid voyage. There'll be fireworks and a ball and so much food and a show, Lila went on excitedly. I'd love it if you came with me. Rosen glanced at her awkwardly. She would have loved to go, but how? From behind, Henry scooped the little girl up. Lila, you see, Rosen can't… But Lila's face fell at once. Uncle Henry, are you going to mock her again? Henry shook his head with a sigh. It's not that, Lila. Ignoring him, she wriggled free and ran to Ian. Uncle Ian, Grandpa already said yes. Now we just need your permission, please. Lila, she's too famous, Henry said worriedly from behind. Everyone knows her face. But it's a masked ball, Lila argued, and you saw it yourself, once. She's properly dressed. No one could ever recognize her. Rosen smiled to herself, watching the little girl fight on her behalf. She truly took after her grandfather. Then her eyes drifted back to Ian. There was no way he would allow it. Right? But what if he said yes? Then what could she possibly tell him to make him believe she would behave? Before any answer came to her, Ian turned to her himself. Do you want to go, Rosenhauers? He asked calmly. Her eyes widened. Had he really just asked her that? Was he serious? She had no idea what this man was thinking, but this was her only chance, so she seized it. Yes, I want to go. Henry rushed forward, frantic. Sir Ian Connor, are you really going to let her go? He asked in disbelief. Ian replied evenly. I've already given her so much special treatment. What's one more? He reached out and patted Lila's cheek. Besides, she saved Lila. Rosen, who had never once been to a party in her life, still couldn't quite believe she was actually going. Lila, on the other hand, could hardly contain her joy. When they'd first met, the girl had told her she was frightened of Ian Connor. Yet look at her now. She had him wrapped around her finger, Rosen thought happily, before glancing once more at Ian. What had he been about to say to her earlier? Perhaps she would never know. Then she looked out the window. Tonight was the night of Walpurgis, and she still remembered her second night of Walpurgis. Rosen had been 16 then. Following the first air raid, word spread through the entire empire. The nation was at war. Within a year, the southern provinces had fallen under siege, and the people fled north with whatever belongings they could carry, streaming toward the capital, Malona. But Rosen kept her faith in that voice from the sky. In a time of such chaos, the Flying Corps and their young commander were all the people of Ryerton could rely on. Everything would be all right. She was certain of it, because Ian Connor had said so. If he said so, then Ryerton would be safe. That's what she believed. Hurry up, Rosen, we have to get home before Hindley does, Emily called. Rosen hurried after her. I'm coming, but don't forget you promised you'd bake a cake once we're home. She smiled. Aren't you excited too? It's the night of Walpurgis, after all. It must mean something special to you. Of course it does, Emily said, smiling. It used to be the night of witches, and it's my birthday. Why didn't you say so earlier? I'd have bought you something. Well, birthdays mean something a little different for me, Emily explained. The night of Walpurgis is the birthday of all witches, but it isn't actually the day I was born. So it's the anniversary of you becoming a witch? Rosen asked, surprised. Then that means you weren't a witch from birth. You became one later? Emily turned to her. Keep your voice down, but yes, that's right. Being a witch was not something passed down. Witches were made only once certain conditions were met. The power of witchcraft was fair in that way. It ran through no bloodline, and it chose neither the powerful nor the rich. It came only to young girls, and always as a shock when it did, which was precisely why people feared witches. Back then, there was one thing Rosen could never understand. Emily knew so many remarkable things, how to brew herbal medicine, and so much more. Why would someone so brilliant have any need for Hindley at all? Why was she still here? Even setting aside her ailing mother, and even though that necklace kept her from drawing on the full reach of her power, she could surely have made a fine living with her magic alone. Once Rosen had asked her why she didn't simply use that magic to heal the sick, instead of laboring over all these medicines. Emily had only smiled. Magic, too, had its limits, she said, but ordinary medicine was something anyone could use. Still, Rosen wasn't satisfied. It seemed so unfair that no one would ever know it was all Emily's hard work and effort. Perhaps she thought if people knew it was Emily saving their lives, they might finally lose their fear. But Emily took her by the shoulders and reminded her firmly never to let anyone know she was a witch. To breathe a word of it would put her in terrible danger. Once you were even suspected of being a witch, you'd be hunted, whether the suspicion was true or not. There had been a woman named Meryl, beloved by everyone right up until the day she was caught using magic just once. It was power that frightened people, and that fear turned all too easily into anger. But Emily was not that kind of person. I may be a witch, she had said, but most people aren't, and that's exactly why I began studying herbs and remedies. Even a witch can't save someone from a terminal illness with magic, but if I share what I know with everyone, then everyone can benefit. Those were her words. She was willing to give away everything she had, even to a world that hated and hunted her own kind. Rosen, come and sit, Emily called out. Hindley won't be home tonight. It's time for a lesson. Emily was always teaching her useful things out of Hindley's earshot. She wasn't much older than Rosen, but she was wise beyond her years, and she taught her so much. How to make herbal medicine, how to count, how money worked. Rosen could neither read nor write, but she had a sharp memory. Bit by bit, her world widened with everything Emily passed on to her. And now there was no longer only Hindley in it. Emily had become her best friend, a sister, and the only family she had. Emily, if a witch's power isn't passed down through her bloodline, then how does someone become a witch in the first place? Rosen asked. I don't know, nobody does, Emily answered. But you're a witch. Did you just become one overnight? How did it happen? What are the conditions? Rosen pressed. Emily looked at her, eyes narrowing. Rosen, you don't want to become one, do you? She asked seriously. Rosen smiled. Of course not, I'm only curious. Emily sighed. I'm not sure I believe that, but, well, I don't know all the details either. Still, this is what witches say. The blood of one person, one wish, and one piece of magic. Those are the conditions that lead to someone becoming a witch. I don't understand, Rosen said, licking the cream from her finger. A blood, a wish, and magic. What does that even mean? Like I said, I'm not sure, Emily replied. Then does that mean your conditions were met without you ever realizing it? Precisely. Then how old were you when it happened? I was 6, and I did want it, though sure, my life grew harder afterward. And my mother was beside herself. But I wasn't sorry, Emily added with a small laugh. Then she picked up a strawberry. Rosen, I can't tell you exactly how a person becomes a witch, but I can at least tell you why eating this cake tonight matters. You know what they say. If you make a wish over the cake, Valberg will grant it. She cut a slice and handed the plate to Rosen. This is the blood of a person, and by lighting this candle and offering a wish to Valberg, there, now we have our wish, Emily said, touching the flame to the wick. Rosen smiled. I never knew these traditions meant so much. I always thought they were just an excuse. But then, what about the magic? Does that mean the wish coming true? She asked, curious. Rosen, have you ever made a wish over a cake? Emily asked. Rosen giggled. I have, but not over a cake, she said. Then she fell quiet, remembering. The year before, on this very night, she had made a wish to Valberg, and it seemed Valberg had answered, even though it was only the wish of an insignificant child. So that night, with the cake before her, Rosen made another. She wished that Hindley would not come home. But this time, Valberg did not answer her prayers. Hindley returned all the same, dragging Rosen back inside by force. It wasn't that she wished him gone forever. The air raids might never have reached their bunker, but Hindley always found a way to ruin the little scrap of peace they managed to hold on to. Rosen didn't care whether the Empire won the war or lost it. For her, life itself had always been the war, long before any war was ever declared. Rosen, Rosen, Emily called her name over and over, pounding hard on the door. Rosen, open the door, talk to me. But inside the room, Rosen's face had gone pale because that winter, the winter of her 16th year, Rosen stopped getting her period. Back in the present, Henry stood guard outside the door. Inside, Ian Connor leaned against the wall as Rosen turned to face him in a yellow dress. What do you think? Which one suits me best? She asked. That's for you to decide. My opinion doesn't matter, Ian said calmly. And if you wanted help, why did you send the maids away? If this is going to be the last time, then I want to dress myself up. I want to make sure I look as good as I possibly can. So just tell me what you think, Rosen said, turning her back to him a little. Ian sighed. Like I said, I'm no use for this. But when he looked up, the color drained from his face. Hey, what are you doing? Are you really about to undress? The words trailed off the moment his gaze fell on her back. The pale skin there was covered in wounds, bruised blue now, and some of the marks looked long old. Seeing him fall silent, Rosen glanced back over her shoulder. What's the matter? You've seen these before, haven't you? She asked, smiling. Ian stared for a long moment, then dropped his eyes. How often did he beat you? He asked, his voice low. Nearly every day. Almost to death, but never quite that far. Why are you asking, though? That's not important right now. Rosen picked up another dress. So, which one should I wear? The yellow, the red, or the blue? Ian knew she wouldn't let him go without an answer. At last he said, the yellow one. Really? The red and blue won't do? He looked down. It's not that they're no good, I just don't like them. The blood of the war had spoiled the color red for him now. I see, Rosen said, watching him. Then she reached for the blue dress instead. I've made up my mind, my favorite is blue, so this is the one I'll wear, she announced. Ian sighed at her. Why even bother to ask if she'd already decided? His gaze drifted back toward the bruises covering her exposed back, and perhaps that was the real reason he didn't like Blue either. The papers. Never mentioned anything about him beating you. Ian's voice came quietly from behind her. Rosen glanced over her shoulder at him, then turned back. Of course they didn't, she said. That's exactly why I told you my side of it. Ian fell quiet, remembering. When Rosen Walker was first apprehended, the entire nation had been hell-bent on accusing her of being a witch. Nobody wanted to hear the sob story of a woman already labeled as one. And come to think of it now, it was odd. The articles written about Rosen Walker had been endless, and yet no one had ever told the story of the verdifaudi of their murdered husband. Hindley Howers. What was actually known about him? A man in his late 30s, an ordinary, kind-hearted physician of the slums, murdered by his own wife. That was all the information about him the papers had to offer. While every single detail of Rosen's life was discussed and put on display for all to see, by law, every prisoner was supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But that had never been true for this particular case. The defendant was never given the chance to tell her side of the story. Of course, there had been evidence enough to prove she'd killed her husband. But shouldn't someone have asked just once what happened to her? Shouldn't at least one person have stopped to listen? You should have testified in court about the abuse, Ian said. Even if it had worked against you, they wouldn't have been able to label you a witch. Maybe you're right, Rosen said after a while. But they were so eager to kill me regardless. And I don't care about being hated by people I hardly even know. She reached behind her, fumbling with the knot of her dress. Anyway, it's over now. But what's gotten into you? Are you on my side now? Earlier you didn't even want to hear it. And now you're feeling sorry for me? Looks like you need help. Ian said, seeing her fumbling. Let me call your maids. No. Rosen's voice was firm. You do it. You're my partner tonight, and I've heard that men are supposed to help their partners at parties like this. So it's your job to dress me. Ian sighed. Fine. He stepped closer and lowered himself onto one knee. Tie it beautifully, all right? Not some weird soldier's knot? Yes, I know. I'm not an idiot, Ian murmured, tying it. And as he worked, his gaze fell again on her back. How had she become such a tenacious survivor? What was it that lit such a fire within her? Sir Ian Connor, Rosen said, turning slightly toward him. I can see it in your eyes. How much you pity me. Ian looked up. She had already turned away again. Well, you don't have to make any excuses for it, she went on, because I'm glad you feel sorry for me. Ian stood up. I thought you hated being pitied. Well, coming from someone I have a crush on, it's better to be pitied than to be hated by you, she said, sweeping her hair back. But then she paused. The open shoulder of the dress wasn't able to cover the wound there, and she clicked her tongue. I think the yellow one is better. This one doesn't cover my scar. No proper lady would have a scar like this. I'd be announcing that I'm a prisoner dressed like this. Besides, she added, reaching for another dress, you like the yellow one. Ian listened in silence. Then he stepped forward and picked up a matching scarf. It doesn't matter what I like, he murmured. Wear what you want to wear. Slowly, he stretched out his hand and wrapped the scarf around her open shoulder, hiding the wound, and at last he pinned it in place with a brooch. See? It's all covered now. Happy? Rosen looked at the pin he'd attached to the scarf. She remembered him wearing it in all those flyers. It was a mark of victory. Isn't it a bit much for a prisoner like me? She asked, turning to face him. Are you sure you're giving this to me? No takebacks, okay? Ian only looked at her smiling face. Was it some unconscious act of rebellion against the Empire, or was it pity he felt? He wasn't sure. But regardless of that, if he had to wrap her in something, he'd much rather it be this than chains. All dressed up, Rosen slipped her hand into his, and as they walked out, she kept happily stroking the pin at her shoulder. Are you really letting me wear this? Were you going to throw it away or something? Well, no matter. I'm keeping it now, she said, smiling. Ian said nothing. He only looked at her. Rosen Howers had it thoroughly wrong. He didn't dislike her. Even branded a witch, there were still many people who liked her, and he was one of them. As they stepped outside, Henry caught sight of them and sighed. Finally, you're here. She didn't come on you again, did she? He asked Ian. From the side, Lila appeared, dressed up and looking adorable even behind her mask. Rosen, you look beautiful. Oh, and you look so cute, Rosen said, and the two of them hugged, delighted. Then Lila turned to Henry. Isn't this supposed to be a masked ball? Where's your mask, Uncle Henry? It's just stupid. I don't like it, Henry said. Do I look stupid, Uncle Henry? Lila asked innocently. No, you're cute, Lila, Henry answered, flustered. But I'm too big for that sort of thing. Oh, I see, you're too scared to cover your eyes, Lila blurted. Henry's face went pale. Lila, you can't just blurt out everything. But Uncle Henry, you shouldn't keep it a secret. The doctor said everyone should know so they can help you, Lila pressed. Confused, Rosen looked to Ian, asking with her eyes what the child meant. Ian averted his gaze and spoke. Your vision can be affected when you fly. It's common with fighter pilots. The pressure is higher than on the ground, so the blood rushes to your head and things go blurry. Henry sighed in irritation. Were you also set on treating me like I have some problem? He muttered. Rosen looked at Henry quietly. He could no longer bear heights, nor death, nor even a mask. She remembered something Maria had once said: war makes people sick, and a soldier doesn't have to lose a limb to feel it. And yet Henry hadn't been the only one to fly those planes. There had been someone else, too. She turned to Ian. Sir Ian Connor, she called out. Are you all right? Ian looked at her, a little surprised, a little puzzled. But before he could answer, Henry cut in, more irritated than ever. What are you saying? Are you trying to suggest Sir Connor is sick? Rosen faltered. No, I only meant that you were both pilots, and he isn't wearing a mask either, so I was wondering. Henry scoffed. He's nothing like me. Sir Ian Connor, sick? If he were sick, what else would we have left? So much had been left in ruins after the war, and the nation needed at least one good thing to remain intact. Ian Connor was the symbol of victory, the one thing that could not be destroyed no matter what. But Rosen wondered, wasn't that too much for any one man to carry? What if he too was sick, only pretending to be fine, and everyone around him simply buying the lie? He wouldn't even be allowed to let anyone know, he'd just be rotting away from the inside alone. But why are you in uniform? Henry asked Ian. I'm her guard and I'm on duty, Ian replied calmly. So I see no need to wear anything else. Then I can guard her, Henry offered. I don't trust you, Ian said firmly. Henry's mouth fell open in disbelief. You're still saying that? Anyway, I don't trust you either, not after what I saw this morning. Then his face turned serious. And you won't even get married, so of course I have my doubts. You're one to talk, Ian replied calmly. You're no different. No, it's different for me. I'm younger than you, and I have Lila to take care of. But you, why haven't you married? Ian's brow furrowed. Enough, Henry. I've had quite enough of that from the captain. I don't need it from you too. Then he turned to Rosen and offered his hand. Let's go, Howers, put your mask on. Slowly, Rosen placed her hand in his, and together they strode out. Outside, the whole festival was in full booming swing. In all her life, Rosen had never seen a party so grand. Only now did she realize just how colorful the world truly was, beyond the gray confines of her prison. Her eyes drifted to the man at her side, her partner for the evening, none other than Ian Connor himself. No one would ever recognize her now. Without thinking, she gave his hand a squeeze. Ian looked at her. Don't get too close, he reminded her. It might look suspicious. I'm fine with that, but what about you? Rosen said. I mean, I have nothing left to lose. It isn't the same for you. Just don't talk to anyone, Ian instructed. I'll deal with them. You only have to nod along. So they wandered through the crowd, Rosen taking in everything with wide, curious eyes, while Ian quietly gathered a few things for her to eat, along with some wine. She glanced down at the dishes he'd chosen and noticed he hadn't brought anything that could be called exotic. Perhaps he wasn't taking any chances, not after what had happened last time. She picked up the glass he offered. Why is there only one glass? Aren't you going to drink? She asked. Of course not. I'm on duty, he replied calmly. Rosen's face clouded with worry. This wasn't good at all. If he wouldn't drink, her plan was ruined. Oh, come on, she coaxed. If you don't drink, I'll get unbelievably drunk all on my own. You don't want that, do you? Ian only looked at her. I'll manage, he answered. If you want to get drunk, that's your choice. If you'd rather spend what little time you have left to sleep or nursing a hangover. Rosen pouted. She'd thought he had softened toward her, but clearly she'd been wrong. Just look at him, how perfectly calm he was. It made her want to provoke him. Sir Connor, she said deliberately, don't they have any Mario wine? I'd love to try some. Ian stared at her in silence, then answered. No, there isn't any. Are you sure? There must be a bottle in the kitchen. It's quite common at parties like this, she pressed. There isn't any, he repeated. You'd have to go to the bottom of the ocean to find a single drop, because I threw it all overboard. Marry a fruit, marry a wine, anything with Maria in it, while you were bedridden. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't imagined he would go to such lengths. He was every bit as mad as she was, but she had to keep this going. Are you really not going to drink? She asked. Do you ever drink at all? Yes, I do, Ian answered curtly. I knew it. You must indulge now and then. You're a soldier, after all. They drink a lot. She caught herself. No offense to your colleagues. Honestly, I'd never met anyone from the Air Force before, but the officers who used to patrol the village, they were nearly always drunk. So you have a poor impression of soldiers? Ian asked. She looked straight into his eyes. Yes, I hate them all. She paused. Except you. She let out a small sigh. But I suppose I don't hate the Air Force anymore. They fought hard, and if you're the one telling me so, then I can trust it. I can believe whatever you say. The wine was beginning to take its small effect on her, but she couldn't afford to truly give in. She only had to pretend to be drunk, to keep him talking. And yet the man who usually said so little was the one who suddenly spoke. So, Ian asked, why did you kill Hindley Howers? At first Rosen startled, then answered in an irritated voice. Not this again. Don't you ever get sick of asking the same question over and over? Was it a crime of passion? Ian asked. I didn't kill him. And why bother interrogating me anyway? It's all done and over with, Rosen said, frustrated. I don't care. I still want to know, Ian said. That's nonsense. Why are you the one acting drunk? Why even bother asking? You were right, Ian said. Somebody should have asked before. Slowly, Rosen looked down. What was the point in asking now? She picked up her glass and sipped her wine. Like I said, I didn't kill him. So stop with the questions. And what happened to that sweet voice of yours? The one we used to hear in Riorton. The one that promised it would always protect us. Then something occurred to her, and she asked, Do you have a pen? Ian's eyebrows knit together. A pen? What are you up to now? Nothing. I'd just like an autograph. From the hero himself. That's all, she said with a smile. There had been a guard at her prison cell who was forever bragging about owning Ian Connor's autograph. I have a pen but no paper, Ian replied. Then you can sign on my hand, Rosen said. And why would you even want that? Because I love you. She met his eyes with hers. I love you, Ian Connor, so please just give me the autograph, and if you can, sign it in permanent ink so I can look at it when I die. She reached out, drew the pen from his pocket, and pressed it into his hand, then offered up her palm. Now hurry up and do it, she added, smiling. At last Ian sighed, took her hand and signed. Rosen watched him the whole while. He really was a strange man. She was being completely ridiculous right now, yet he still responded so earnestly, and he seemed accustomed to it. She bet he had done this thousands of times before. There were always people watching him, always admirers, always expectations. Yet once he had admitted that he hated crowds. He wasn't really suited for being famous, but someone had to do it. It must have been exhausting. He had comforted an entire empire during the war. But who had comforted him? He might be a hero, but heroes were still only human. How did you make it through the war? The question escaped Rosen before she could stop herself. Ian halted, looking up. I mean, I was just thinking that a hero needs a hero too, she added. It's not as though you could simply look in the mirror. Ian didn't answer. There, he said instead, pointing at the name. Why are you avoiding it? Rosen began, but then she paused, looked down at her hand and flinched. What is this? She looked at him. Are you making fun of me? This isn't your name. She stood and held out her palm. Do you think I can't recognize your name? Are you really mocking me? She demanded, angry. Rosen could neither read nor write. She couldn't even write her own name. But there was one word she had no trouble reading at all, because she had seen it so many times in those flyers. It was forever engraved in her mind. She snatched the pen from his hand, took hold of his, and wrote Ian's name across his skin. See? This is your name. Now do you believe me? Ian looked down at his palm. There was his name, written in the clumsy hand of a child. I told you I like you, and yet you trick me, Rosen said, disappointed. I wrote your name, Ian murmured quietly. Startled, Rosen raised her palm and looked again, and there was a lovely flowing script. It was her name. Why did you write my name? She asked softly. Ian sighed. Just because I wanted to, he replied. She sat back down. So, is it Rosenhauer's? No, Rosen Walker. Rosen looked down. He had always called her Rosenhauer's, but she was glad he had written Rosen Walker. She glanced up to find him still staring at his palm. If you don't like my handwriting, I can wipe it off for you, she offered. But he closed his hand around it. No need, he said. Rosen pouted. Then why was he still staring at it? But just then the music swelled behind them, and everyone drifted toward the dance floor to savor the festival. Rosen sprang happily to her feet. Sir Ian Connor, she said, running over and seizing his hand. Dance with me. Ian looked at her calmly. After a moment he replied, I'm sorry, but I don't dance with drunkards. Did you just refuse a lady's request for a dance? Do you still dare call yourself a gentleman? Rosen huffed, then smiled. See, I sound just like a captain, don't I? Henry told me to introduce myself as a relative of the Revel family, which makes me a proper lady for the night. So come on, hurry up. She chuckled and strode forward. Ian pushed himself up from the table and caught her hand. Rosen, he called in a low voice. The night air smelled sweet. Let's call it a night. You're drunk, Ian said. Rosen's mouth fell open. What a mood killer. So what if I'm drunk? What's the problem? Now come on, let's go dance, she insisted. I can't dance to this one. I only know the waltz, Ian said. Wow, what a waste of a handsome face, Rosen muttered. I learned the waltz at the military academy. After that, I spent 10 years at war. So, Ian added. So that's why you don't have a girlfriend, Rosen said, crossing her arms. But then she leaned in close to his face. But then, are you saying it isn't that you don't want to dance with me? It's only that you don't know how? She said in a flirtatious voice. She grabbed his hand and pulled him along with her. Let's just go. We'll wait for a waltz. She led him to the edge of the ship. Let's wait here, she said, leaning close to the deck railing. At last, she had her chance to look around. But as she scanned the deck, Ian came and stood beside her. Hey, why are you getting in my way, blocking the view? She complained. You're being too obvious, Ian said calmly. Rosen pouted. She really should have gotten at least a little wine into him. Sir Ian Connor? She called, turning his face toward hers. You should keep your eyes on your partner, you know. What are you? Ian began. But before he could finish, the music behind them changed. Rosen turned toward it. I know this song. It used to play in the square in Ryerton. Emily told me its name, she said. It had been so long since she'd spoken Emily's name aloud. You know, everything I learned from Emily. She's so clever, Rosen added. Until now, Rosen had avoided talking about Emily, afraid that somehow it might lead people back to her. This person you're talking about, Emily Howers, Ian said. Where is she now, and why were you left all alone? His face wore the look of a man who was worried. Rosen looked at him in shock. She had never imagined Ian would be curious about Emily's disappearance. Or wait, was he suspecting that Emily had been her accomplice? Or was it actually possible that he believed Rosen had been wrongly accused for something Emily had done? I don't know, Rosen replied firmly. But I don't understand how nobody questioned it in court, Ian said, genuinely puzzled. Isn't it obvious? Because she had nothing to do with it. She didn't kill Hindley, and I know nothing about where she is now. Ian frowned thoughtfully. But it could have changed the verdict. Or perhaps we could mention it now. Rosen immediately cut him off. What's done is done. And I know nothing, so stop questioning me. You won't get answers from someone who doesn't have any. She leaned against the railing, intentionally looking away from him. It felt as though he was staring straight into her soul. It was true that she had wanted Ian to listen to her story. But she had never wanted him to become this invested. She never wanted him to actually believe her. All she wanted was for him to pity her for a little while. Long enough for her to steal the key. A little irritated, she turned back toward him. Anyway, why are you doing this? And why are you angry with me? You keep furrowing your brows all the time, she huffed. I'm not used to that side of you. Ian looked slightly surprised before letting out a sigh and leaning against the railing beside her. How would you like me to treat you? He asked. Rosen's eyes widened. The answer had been unexpectedly gentle, but this was her chance. Like a friend from home, she answered. Like someone you're meeting again after a long time, someone who doesn't have long left to live. And we're both from Ryerton, remember? Before Ian could answer, a large wave suddenly struck the ship. The deck tilted sharply. Rosen lost her balance. Her heels couldn't hold her, and just as she thought she would tumble off the deck, a large hand wrapped around her waist, catching her smoothly against him. She looked up at him. Be careful. His voice was calm. We're at sea. For a moment she simply stared at his face. Then she remembered. This was her second chance, and she couldn't afford to waste it. Slowly, she leaned closer and wrapped both arms around him, holding him tightly. Ian froze instantly. After a moment, he looked down at her. Rosen, are you drunk? I'm not drunk. She lifted her gaze toward him. I'm dying anyway, so let me have this much. Then her expression suddenly became serious. Sir Connor, this ship should carry military supplies, shouldn't it? I mean, some herb that brings on sleep. No, actually, something poisonous. Don't soldiers keep that kind of thing in case they're captured by the enemy? What on earth are you thinking? Ian asked. Rosen tightened her grip on his coat. Don't you feel sorry for me? And I promise I won't use it on this ship. I'll wait until I reach the Isle of Monte. It's a win-win. I'll use it there and quietly go into the good night. Do you really want to watch me suffer? Of course she was lying. She had no intention of doing anything like that. She was simply trying to shake his composure, trying to find a crack in his armor. Or perhaps, she continued softly, do you hate me so much that you'd rather see me die painfully? Ian listened quietly. Then suddenly, his arms tightened around her, pulling her into a firm embrace. I know nobody will believe me, he whispered near her ear. But trust me, I have never hated you, not once. Rosen looked genuinely surprised. Then a small smile appeared on her face. Thank you for saying that even if it's a lie, it still makes me feel good. She slowly pulled away. You'll probably regret hugging me on impulse, but don't worry, you deserve to live loosely and freely for at least one day of your life. For the first time that evening, Ian smiled. Rosen pouted. Just look at that face, and that smile. Now she completely understood why the government had chosen him as the Empire's poster boy. Who could possibly say no to a face like that? As she glanced around, she noticed everyone staring at them. The sudden embrace had attracted quite a bit of attention, especially the women, and they weren't even trying to hide it. Which one do you like? Rosen asked teasingly. Ian ignored the question. Rosen suddenly blinked. Then her eyes widened dramatically. Wait, don't tell me you've never been with a woman. Ian frowned immediately. Shut up. Oh my God, you're serious. Rosen looked completely amused. I said shut up, and stop causing trouble for me. Fine, fine, she laughed. But why? Are you a huge germaphobe or something? You're still going on about this? But no, I'm not. Rosen tilted her head. Then, do you like men? She whispered it as though sharing a secret. No. The answer came immediately. Rosen secretly felt relieved. Otherwise, what would happen to her plan? Then, she leaned even closer. Is there some problem down there? Ian looked up exasperated. You're driving me insane. But no, I don't have that kind of problem. Now please mind your own business. You're clearly drunk, so sit there, he said, settling her down on a side sofa. Rosen fought hard not to doze off from the wine. Just then, her eyes fell on the lifeboat, and they sparkled. Her mind began to race. Where am I? She fixed the spot in her memory. She could slip away in the dead of night, reach this lifeboat, turn the lever to lower it, and then use the key to get it up and running. But wait, where is the key? Right. In the end, it all came down to the key, and just as she was about to speak to Ian, a man strode forward from the side. "Excuse me, but I'd like to know, miss, are you the partner of Ian Connor?" he asked. Rosen looked at the man in confusion. Who was he? Why was he suddenly interrupting them? And more importantly, she wasn't even sure how to answer his question. Before she could say anything, Ian stepped forward. "Yes, she is my partner, Sir Gregory," he said. "But what business could you possibly have with her?" Gregory smiled. "Nothing. I simply wanted to talk to her." Then his eyes drifted between the two of them. "I have to admit, though, it's surprising to finally see you with a lady you're this close to." His smile slowly curled into a smirk. Rosen glanced between the two men. They both addressed each other as Sir, so Gregory was clearly a soldier as well. But they certainly didn't seem like friends. Perhaps they had attended the academy together? Whatever the case, Ian looked noticeably uncomfortable, and that made Rosen a little uneasy. Gregory turned toward her. "By any chance are you mute, miss?" He smiled politely, or perhaps just shy. Then he offered his hand. "It would be an honor if you dance with me." As he stepped closer, Ian's brows immediately furrowed. Before he could speak, Rosen stood up and quickly slipped beside Ian, clinging to his arm. "I'm sorry," she said firmly, "but I don't dance with men unless they're as good-looking as Sir Connor." Gregory's smile twitched. "You're the difficult type." He leaned slightly closer. "You're not going to make this easy for me, are you?" Rosen instinctively flinched, but before she could react, Gregory reached out and grabbed her hand. "Come now, let's have a dance, shall we? We can get to know each other better. Besides, it's rude to spend the entire evening with only one partner." Before Rosen could pull away, Ian swiftly stepped forward and moved her behind him. "Joshua Gregory." His voice turned cold. "Stop bothering her. Didn't you hear her say no?" Gregory dramatically ruffled his hair. "So I'm the villain now?" He laughed. "You think you're a gentleman and I'm not? Why? Because I ran away? Are you still hung up on that?" His voice suddenly rose. "Doesn't everyone know that was the smartest thing to do? What's honor worth if you're dead?" Gregory pointed at himself. "All your comrades are dead. But I survived, and I will become a general." Ian's eyes darkened. "Are you saying you're proud of that? Taking credit for the dead?" Gregory scoffed. "Look what happened to all of you. Everyone who stayed died. And look at your precious Revel. He barely survived, now he's completely screwed up in the head. Rosen." Ian didn't even look at Gregory anymore. Engaging with him is pointless. "Let's go." But Gregory wasn't finished. "Hey, where are you going? Just tell me who she is." He followed after them and suddenly reached toward Rosen's face. "Let me see who she—" Before he could finish, a fist slammed directly into his face. The impact sent him crashing to the ground. Gregory stared up in shock. "How dare you?" Gregory muttered, wiping blood from his mouth. Ian stood over him, his expression darker than Rosen had ever seen before. "She is a lady of the Revel family." Ian's voice was dangerously calm. "And you will not mistreat her." By now, countless eyes had turned toward them. The commotion had attracted attention from all over the deck, and attention was the last thing they needed. Ian immediately turned toward Rosen. "Please excuse me for a moment." Before she could react, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. Rosen froze. The sudden movement caught her completely off guard. Ian didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away. Peeking over his shoulder, Rosen looked back toward Gregory. "You can be impulsive too, I see. Shouldn't you have talked with him first?" Ian didn't slow down. It's a waste of time trying to reason with a man who has no sense. His answer was immediate. Rosen blinked, then curiosity got the better of her, by the way. "Who is he?" "A classmate from the academy." Ian's answer was short. Behind them, Gregory slowly pushed himself back to his feet. "Ian Connor!" His voice echoed across the deck. "What makes you different, huh?" Ian stopped mid-stride. Rosen looked up at his face. Gregory laughed bitterly. "You say I took credit for your dead comrades. But the same could be said about you. How dare you look down on me, when you abandoned your hometown and let it burn, then had the audacity to lead that victory parade like some kind of hero." Rosen looked up at Ian. His face had gone completely still. Behind them, Gregory laughed like a madman. "Go ahead, run away. Ignore me, go and run from the truth. But you know what? You're just as broken as Revel, and it's only a matter of time before everyone sees it. You've never once successfully protected a damn thing, Ian Connor." Leaving those words hanging behind him, Ian walked on, without looking back. "You're not still thinking about what he said, are you?" Rosen asked after they had moved far away from the commotion. She glanced up at Ian. "Just ignore him, he's a jerk." Then she frowned slightly. "He reminds me of Hindley, always playing the victim. Ridiculous." Ian remained silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "But he's not entirely wrong." Rosen immediately shook her head. "He's just jealous of you, that's all. How could anyone even dislike you? I can understand the entire nation disliking me. But you're a hero," she said, as Ian set her down on the ground. Ian paused. Don't say that, Rosenhauers, he said in a low voice. Then he turned to her. And how can you be so certain no one likes you, when everyone likes me? Rosen smiled. Well, isn't it obvious? Name even one person who likes me. Her smile sharpened playfully. Could you like me? Ian looked at her for a long moment before answering. Yes, I could. Rosen turned to him, her smile spreading wide. Really? She asked. You did say you don't dislike me, but do you like me? She pressed. Ian froze, not saying a word. She laughed. See? You can't say yes. Anyway, let's sit there. The fireworks will start soon, Lila told me. As they settled down, Ian slipped off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. Rosen startled. I'm fine, she murmured. Take it. It can get cold on the ship, Ian said. And soon the fireworks began. Oh, it's starting, Rosen chimed happily, gazing up at the sky with wonder in her eyes. Following her, Ian looked up too. One after another, the show unraveled overhead, the sky drenched in light and fire. Rosen watched it all, delighted. Hey, did you see that one? It was so big. Amazing, wasn't it? She turned to Ian, but the words caught in her throat. Rosen's heart sank. The excitement vanished from her face. Ian had gone completely pale. His eyes trembled as they remained fixed on the sky. The brilliant lights reflected in his eyes, yet he didn't seem to be seeing the fireworks at all. It was as though he was looking at something else entirely. Rosen called out his name. Sir Connor, what's wrong? She knelt beside him, but Ian didn't answer. Instead, he slowly raised both hands and covered his ears, as though trying to block out the explosions echoing across the sea. That was when Rosen realized it. Ian Connor had a secret. A secret he had hidden so well that no one was ever supposed to discover it. Yet somehow, of all people, she was the one who had found out. Her eyes darted around the deck. There was only one thing she could do. I'll go get Henry. She hurriedly stood up. But before she could take even a single step, Ian grabbed her wrist. Don't. His grip trembled. Don't tell Henry. He can't know. He won't be able to handle it. Rosen frowned. Her frustration immediately boiled over. That's not important right now. And besides, that should be his decision, not yours. Ian slowly loosened his tie, his breathing becoming more uneven. No. No one can know. I didn't think a few fireworks would do this. He leaned back against the deck, struggling to steady himself. Just give me a minute. I'll be fine. I've managed until now, so just wait. It'll go away. His words came out between uneven breaths. Rosen stared at him. Is he an idiot? He could barely breathe. He couldn't even stand properly. Then it finally hit her. He was a hero, but that didn't mean he wasn't human. Heroes could break. They could be afraid. They could suffer. Just like the man sitting in front of her now. Rosen crouched beside him again. You must have some medicine with you. Just tell me where it is. I'll go get it. She glanced toward the sky as another firework exploded overhead. The fireworks are far from over. And you're barely breathing. She looked back at him. You don't have to worry about me. I know exactly what my situation is. We're surrounded by sea monsters. I don't even have the key to a lifeboat. A faint smile appeared on her face. I'm not asking you to trust me. But, right, now, I'm the only person you can rely on, and don't worry. If you're afraid, I'll tell everyone. I won't. Besides, who would believe me? The whole empire already thinks I'm a liar. Remember? Ian slowly lifted his eyes toward her. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, almost in a whisper, Are you disappointed in me? He asked. Rosen blinked. Ian continued. The person you thought was a hero is actually a complete mess. You must be disappointed. You were the last person, the very last person, I wanted to find out. Rosen stared at him in disbelief. Why does that even matter? You're barely breathing, she whispered back. But Ian continued speaking as though he hadn't heard her. I wanted to protect them all. That's why I got into that. Plain, I did everything I could. His breathing shook again. I wasn't lying. I wasn't. Rosen gently cupped Ian's cheeks with both her hands. Sir Connor, she called his name softly until his trembling eyes finally met hers. Just because you couldn't protect everyone doesn't mean your omises were lies. Her voice remained calm. No. I'm not disappointed in you, and I don't resent you. So please, just this once, let me help you. He smiled faintly. And you may not want to accept this, but the truth is, I'm one of the lives you did save. Ian's expression finally cracked. Without another word, he pulled Rosen tightly into his arms. She froze in surprise. She was right. Witch or not, out of everyone in their hometown, she was the one person he had managed to save. What are you doing? Rosen asked quietly, startled by the sudden embrace. Ian buried his face against her shoulder. Let's just stay like this, until the fireworks are over, he whispered between uneven breaths. Rosen slowly raised her hand and gently patted his back. Okay, she spoke softly. Just focus on your breathing. Ian remained silent for a moment, then, almost too quietly to hear. All this time, I kept telling myself, at least, I was able to save you. Hearing those words, Rosen finally understood. Just as Ian had once been her source of comfort, she had unknowingly become his. People always said that those who remained strong no matter what hardships they faced were heroes. And to the Empire, that pillar of strength was Ian Connor. Everyone believed he had survived the horrors of war because he was simply stronger than everyone else. But the reality was different. He had been crushed beneath the title of hero, and the responsibility that came with it. He was just a man who found comfort in the embrace of a mere prisoner. Because more than anything, he still longed for the hometown he had failed to protect. Rosen continued gently patting his back. She could hardly believe he had carried this burden alone for so many years. After a while, Ian slowly pulled away. Still breathing heavily, he looked at her. My cabin. His voice was strained. Go to my cabin. The second drawer. It's unlocked. There should be a small brown packet inside. Bring it to me, please. Rosen nodded immediately. Without wasting another second, she hurried toward the cabin. As she ran, one thought kept repeating in her mind. Has Ian Connor completely lost his mind? He had just sent her alone to his cabin, a prisoner, completely unsupervised. For a moment, she worried about leaving him by himself. Will he be okay? But she quickly shook the thought away. She had no time to hesitate. She had to focus. Reaching the cabin, she hurriedly opened the second drawer. Just as Ian had said, there was a small brown packet inside. She picked it up, sleeping powder. But as she looked at it more closely, her brows furrowed. It was only a single dose. That won't work. She needed much more than this. Quickly, she began searching through the rest of the cabin. One drawer, locked. Another, locked. She clenched her jaw. Ian Connor wasn't an idiot after all. This was exactly why he had trusted her enough to send her here alone. Because there was nothing she could actually use. Rosen stopped for a brief moment. Wait, I just told him I wanted to help him. So what exactly am I doing right now? A flicker of guilt crossed her face, but then she quickly shook it away. No, he's the one who made the mistake. Determined, she reached for another drawer. Surprisingly, it wasn't locked. It simply refused to open. Something inside seemed to be jamming it. Rosen grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled with all her strength. The drawer suddenly slid open. At the same moment, a thick book slipped out and landed on the floor with a heavy thud. What is this? Rosen murmured as she picked up the book from the floor. Then she let out a quiet sigh. I can't even read. What use is this to me? She was about to put it back exactly where she had found it, not wanting to raise any suspicion. But I'll just take a quick look. With that thought, she slowly flipped the book open. The moment she did, her eyes widened. Inside were photographs. Her photographs, newspaper clippings, magazine cuttings. Every page was filled with articles about Rosen Walker. My God, she whispered in disbelief. What is all this? Had Ian been gathering information about her all this time? But then something else caught her attention. Several words had been circled over and over again. The same word, again and again. But what is it? She frowned. Unable to read, she could only stare at the unfamiliar letters. Then suddenly, she remembered. Slowly, she raised her hand and looked at her palm. The same word, written there in Ian's handwriting. It was her name, Rosen. Her heart skipped a beat. Then, why? Why had he circled her name over and over throughout the entire book? Wasn't that a little excessive for a simple background investigation? No way. She slowly sank onto the floor. One memory after another rushed back into her mind. All this time, I kept telling myself that at least I was able to save you. I have never hated you. Not once. I know more about you than you think I do. Every word Ian had spoken. He hadn't been lying. He had meant every single one of them. The guilt he carried, the pity he showed her, it had all been genuine. Rosen let out a quiet scoff and gently closed the book. A sly smile slowly appeared on her lips. I'm glad, she whispered to herself. I'm glad I can't read. Otherwise, I would have used every bit of this against him. She carefully placed the book back exactly where it had fallen. Ian Connor, you never should have trusted me. Without another thought, she resumed searching through the cabin. It didn't take long before she found exactly what she had been looking for. Rosen Walker. She was a coward. A woman who only knew how to run away, and this sleeping powder would become her weapon to do exactly that. What Ian Connor never could have imagined was that Rosen knew sleeping powder was as potent as a sedative, something ordinary people rarely had access to. Thanks to Emily, she knew exactly how it worked. Colorless, odorless, easy to dissolve into water or wine. She gently tucked the packet away. For a brief moment, guilt crossed her face. She hoped Ian wouldn't be too hurt by her betrayal. After all, he still had good people around him. Henry, Lila, the captain. She believed that one day he would finally break free from the heavy chains of being called a hero and learn to live happily without depending on a witch for comfort. When she told him she loved him, she had truly meant those words. But loving him didn't mean she could choose him over her own freedom. If she remained on this ship, she would die. So she had already made up her mind. Tomorrow night, she would leave this ship alive, whether she succeeded or failed. Rosen Walker would never give up, not even to this foolish heart of hers. Meanwhile, Ian was still struggling to catch his breath. How much time has passed, he wondered. Then another thought struck him. What was I even thinking? He had sent a prisoner, someone with a history of escaping, alone to search his cabin, completely uncuffed. If Henry ever found out, he would lose his mind. Ian pressed a hand against his forehead. Then again, there was no realistic way Rosen could escape. The sea was filled with monsters, and most of the crew aboard the ship were armed. There was simply no reality in which she could successfully flee. And yet, perhaps he had unconsciously given her the faintest sliver of hope. When the mission to personally escort Rosen Walker had first been assigned to him, Ian had immediately requested to be removed from it. He knew exactly what this was. It was the government's attempt to pin everything on a witch, to give the public someone they could blame. And Ian knew, at least in this matter, that Rosen was innocent, but his request had been denied. Sacrificing a few for the sake of the many, that is what war is at its core. The government official's words still echoed in his mind. You've handled that reality just fine until now, so I don't understand what your problem is all of a sudden. Those people were always skilled at weighing advantages and disadvantages. And Ian himself had once been a perfectly functioning part of that machine. He had believed he had adapted to their way of thinking. So why? Why was he hesitating now? The entire empire called Rosen a liar, yet Ian had come to believe she was one of the most honest people he had ever met. She spoke her thoughts so openly, so defenselessly, almost as if she believed her feelings weren't worth protecting. Or perhaps she simply thought her words could never affect him. Ian let out a long sigh and slowly pulled himself to his feet, gripping the ship's railing for support. He wished that were true. If her words truly meant nothing to him, everything would have been much easier. Then, perhaps, it would have been easier to let her go. His grip tightened around the railing. If she found a lifeboat, what are the chances she'd actually reach land alive? He frowned. Why was he even thinking like that? Closing his eyes, another memory surfaced. A newspaper poster. The jailbreak witch arrested. It had been the first time Ian had seen Rosen. He had visited the ruins of Ryerton after the war, and the newspaper had been plastered against a broken wall. It was probably meant for people to spit on, to throw stones at. But when Ian looked at her picture, he felt saved. At least, she survived. It was ridiculous. Yet from that day onward, he had kept that portrait with him, as though desperately clinging to the one life he had managed to save. And now, she had started trying to kill herself because she believed escape was impossible. He knew what awaited her at the Isle of Monte. A slow, painful death. She knew it too. That was why she had asked him for a less painful way out. If that was truly the case, wouldn't this be the kinder choice? Ian slowly pulled his pistol from its holster. Just then, Ian! A frantic voice broke through his thoughts. What are you doing over there? Sit down! What if you lose your balance and fall into the sea? Rosen hurried toward him, worry evident on her face. Here, I brought your medicine. Give me your hand. Ian quietly looked at her. There was always one question that lingered in the back of his mind. Had it ever truly mattered to me whether she was a murderer or not? If time were turned back, would he refuse this mission? Or would he do everything in his power to make sure he was the one chosen to escort her? If pity were the only thing he felt, he would have already granted her a merciful death and disguised it as an accident. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He had sent her alone to his cabin, knowing perfectly well she would search through everything. He had deliberately given her just enough hope, enough that she might stop trying to harm herself. Hey, Rosen crossed her arms. Why are you smiling at me like that? It's nothing new, Ian answered quietly. I've always been looking at you, Rosen blinked. To see if I'm trying to escape? Perhaps, Ian replied calmly. If you haven't noticed. Rosen rolled her eyes. How very professional of you. It seems you're feeling much better now. Ian simply looked at her. And in that moment, he finally understood something. No one had forced him to take this mission. From beginning to end, every choice had been his own. Slowly, he reached up and gently brushed his fingers against Rosen's cheek. She flinched at the unexpected touch. Before she could react, Ian slid an arm around her waist, cupped her face, and kissed her. It wasn't a rushed kiss, nor was it one born of impulse alone. In that single moment, Ian finally accepted the truth. He had chosen Rosen Walker, and it was a choice he had made long before he ever admitted it to himself. The sea breeze drifted quietly past as the two stood together on the deck. For a brief moment, the rest of the world disappeared. Then Ian slowly pulled away and turned to leave. Rosen frowned. What was that? She thought. Was he really going to ignore her after kissing her? A playful smile spread across her face as she hurried after him, slipping her arms lightly around his neck. Sir Connor. You can't tease me like that and then pretend nothing happened. I liked it, so let's continue. Ian let out a quiet sigh before gently taking her by the hand and leading her toward the cabin. Rosen tried everything she could think of to keep him outside a little longer, but Ian refused to budge. Maybe I should have kissed him back, she thought with a quiet huff. Walking behind him, she couldn't resist teasing him again. But you're definitely feeling better now. The medicine seems to be working. Then she tilted her head with a mischievous grin. And what was that kiss about? Did I finally look tempting? But why so restrained? She stuck her tongue out playfully. Want me to teach you? Ian let out a weary sigh. Why do you always have to be so vulgar? Then he stopped walking. Turning back toward her, he folded his arms behind his back and slightly turned one cheek toward her. I was out of line. You can slap me if you want. Rosen blinked in surprise. He was actually giving her permission to slap him. Instead, she smiled mischievously. This was her chance. She grabbed Ian by his tie and gently pulled him closer. Before he could react, she kissed him. Ian stood there, completely caught off guard. For a brief moment, he simply froze, too surprised to respond. Then, startled by her boldness, he gently pulled himself back. Rosen looked at him with a playful smile. Now we're even. Let's head back inside. Coming out of his daze, Ian turned his back to her. It's getting late, so hurry up and get ready for bed. And if you're uncomfortable changing... Before he could finish speaking, Rosen casually loosened the knot behind her dress. The party gown slipped away. She pulled off her mask, then quietly walked behind Ian and wrapped her arms around him. Ian blinked. How did you get changed so quickly? Rosen smiled mischievously. All these party dresses are practically the same. And besides, you kissed me first. So you can't blame me for misunderstanding. Ian gently caught her hands and turned her. We're already even. His tone remained calm. So stop with the nonsense and get some sleep. Rosen let out an annoyed huff. Seriously? Until tonight, she had been convinced Ian simply wasn't interested in anything. But now, after kissing her first, he was acting as though nothing had happened. She climbed onto the bed dramatically, determined not to give up. She reached out and grabbed Ian's hand, trying to pull him toward her, but the man remained standing firm. Did you really think you could force me? He looked at her in disbelief. Rosen, stop! Before he could finish, she leaned closer again, trying to steal another kiss. Ian sighed, realizing there was no arguing with her while she was in this mood. Instead, he simply picked up a blanket and gently wrapped it around her. Rosen frowned immediately. Hey! I'm suffocating in this. You said I'd be free. Ian rubbed his forehead tiredly. Go to sleep. You also promised you wouldn't cause any trouble. Rosen looked at him, clearly frustrated. But then, obviously you'd kiss me. Obviously I'd think that's what you wanted. Her voice grew quieter. Or, she hesitated. Do you think I'm dirty? Is that why you don't want to be with me? She looked down at her hands. I really do want to stay with you. You can use me however you like. The moment those words left her mouth, Ian's expression changed. His brows knitted together as he looked at her with glare. Rosen immediately flinched. I'm sorry. I take it back. But please don't look at me like that. Ian let out a slow sigh, seeing her like that. He quietly sat. Rosen, come here. His voice was gentle. Rosen slowly raised herself and moved closer, sitting on Ian's lap almost like a child seeking comfort. I'm not angry at you, Rosen, Ian said gently. And I'm sorry if I scared you. After a brief pause, he asked quietly. But, Rosen, do you really want to sleep with me? Rosen looked at him, then answered awkwardly. Of course. Ian held her gaze. And why would you want that? Rosen gulped. Why does he have to ask something like that? Well, she mumbled, avoiding his eyes. You're the most attractive man I've ever met. You're perfect in every way. And this is probably the last chance I'll ever have to spend the night with someone like you. She blushed at her own words and let out an embarrassed huff. And I'm sure you'd like it too. Of course you wouldn't know, since you've never tried it. Ian simply looked at her in silence before asking, Was that how it was for you? Rosen looked at him, confused. Did you enjoy it that much? She scratched the back of her neck, unable to answer for a moment. Not really, to be honest, she admitted quietly. But the men always seem to. Ian's expression softened. But did you do it because you wanted to? Rosen fell silent. After a long pause, she slowly leaned into his embrace. I don't know, she whispered. Then she lightly poked his chest. But let's forget about that. I know I want it this time. Ian watched her quietly for a moment before gently patting her head. Rosen, he said in a calm, soothing voice, what you need is someone to hold you, not just a man to spend the night with. For a moment, Rosen simply stared at him. Her fingers tightened around his shirt. Then, why won't you hold me? Her voice trembled. I just want to stay with you tonight. What's wrong with it? You felt sorry for me, didn't you? So, why can't you indulge me just this once? She lowered her eyes. Unless you're really repulsed by me. Ian listened without interrupting. He gently patted her head again. Of course not, Rosen. He spoke softly. If we'd met under normal circumstances, we might have spent the night of Valpurgis together. His eyes drifted over the scars on her body. But look at the state you're in. You're malnourished. You're covered in scars. And it seems you've become far too used to people treating you badly. He slowly lifted his hand and cupped her cheek. Perhaps this is selfish of me, but I don't want to become just another one of those men. With that, Ian stood up and picked up a small box from the side table. He held it out to her. What is this? Rosen asked. Ian opened the box. Inside was a small piece of cake. I asked the kitchen to prepare it, he said as he lit the candle on top. It's the night of Valpurgis. I thought it might mean something to you. He looked at her. You can make a wish if you want. Rosen stared quietly at the candle. Then she slowly closed her eyes. Oh, Valberg, please give me strength. I don't want love anymore. She no longer wished for love. What she needed now was the strength to face the hardships ahead and the will to stand on her own in this harsh world. Opening her eyes, she looked at Ian. Aren't you going to make a wish? Ian smiled faintly. No. Then he nodded toward the bed. Now get into bed, be quiet. If you do that, I'll get in bed with you. Later as they lay together, Ian simply held her in his embrace. After a while, Rosen looked up at him. Sir Connor. Why didn't you make a wish too? Isn't there anything you long for? Ian looked down at her. I don't want to talk about myself. I'd rather hear more about you. But I already told you everything last time. And I'm sure there's more. Rosen lowered her gaze. So, you're really going to listen to me no matter what I say? Ian's eyes followed her every movement. Yes, he answered quietly. Just, don't lie to me. The day Rosen realized she wasn't getting her period, she couldn't even imagine continuing to live while carrying that pathetic man's child. Before she could do anything, the door suddenly crashed open. Emily rushed inside and wrapped her arms tightly around Rosen from behind. How did you? Rosen murmured in shock. Then she noticed the shattered door and realized Emily had used her magic to break it open. Let's get you out of here first, Emily whispered urgently. But the moment Rosen felt Emily's embrace, all the strength left her body. She broke down sobbing. I can't have Hindley's baby, she cried. I'd rather die. Emily held her tighter, gently calming her down. Hey, look at me. She cupped Rosen's face and smiled reassuringly. I'll help you, okay? After all, I'm a witch. And not just any witch, I know herbs better than anyone. So just leave it to me. Everything will be all right, okay? Rosen truly felt she had found a sister in Emily, someone who would stand beside her no matter what. But tears continued to stream down her face. What if I get pregnant again? She sobbed. What are we supposed to do then? We can't keep getting rid of it over and over again. She lowered her head. I don't even need a home anymore. Not one like this. I don't even need Hindley. Tear-filled eyes. So let's run away together. You, me, and your mother. Emily remained silent for a moment. 3 days earlier, she and Hindley had gone to visit her mother, whose condition had grown much worse. Emily had managed to save a little money and had asked Hindley for a little more after he received payment from a merchant. But Hindley had replied without hesitation. No. Then he smiled. I can't believe this, Emily. You actually had money saved up. You told me you didn't have any. Emily's anger flared. Of course I told you that, she snapped. Otherwise you'd have wasted it all on gambling. The words escaped before she could stop herself. Then she saw Hindley's calm expression. A chill ran through her. She hurried to where she had hidden her savings and opened the box. It was empty. Hindley slowly walked over and lightly tapped the pendant around her neck. Just as slow as your mother, he murmured with a smile. That was the moment Emily realized there was no hope left for them in this place. But it still wasn't the right time to leave. If they were going to escape, they needed time. They had to save enough money to support themselves first. So hang in there a little longer, Rosen, Emily said softly as she gently caressed Rosen's cheek. We'll leave, but we have to be patient. Rosen nodded through tear-filled eyes before throwing her arms around Emily once again, sobbing into her shoulder. The two women held each other tightly, hoping that one day their lives like this would finally come to an end. Neither of them realized that the man responsible for all their suffering had been standing outside the door the entire time, listening to every single word. One morning, Rosen prepared breakfast as Hindley walked into the kitchen. Where's Emily? He asked, pulling out a chair. Oh, she went out to look for some herbs, Rosen answered calmly. She said it might take a few days. Hindley nodded and sat down, taking a bite of his bread. It seems you two have become quite close, he remarked. You've gotten a little chubbier, too. His eyes drifted toward her. So, any news of a baby yet? Rosen flinched at the mention of a child but quickly composed herself. Not yet, she answered hesitantly. Hindley continued eating as if discussing the weather. The supervisor told me you were perfectly healthy. She couldn't have been lying. So why are we still without a child after almost a year? Emily had secretly given Rosen a powdered herb. She was supposed to mix it with water and drink it twice a day. Under the right circumstances, the herb became poisonous. It was harmless to a healthy adult except for causing a mild stomachache, but it was deadly to a fetus and Rosen must keep it secret. That was how Rosen had been protecting herself all this time. Forcing herself to remain calm, she stepped closer and gently wrapped her arms around Hindley. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "You know I'm healthy. We still have plenty of chances. So, please don't be angry." She tried to soothe him. Hindley looked at her for a moment before nodding. "Maybe I'm just being impatient." He stood up and adjusted his coat. "Well, take care of yourself. I'll be back after I win today." A smile spread across his face. "Then we can spend some time together. I'm feeling lucky today." With that, he walked out of the house. The moment the door closed, Emily stepped out from her hiding place. Their plan was simple. Once Hindley left for gambling, they would search the house for money, pack whatever they could, and escape. When Hindley went gambling, he rarely came home early. Emily hurried into his study and began searching through the drawers. After a few moments, she found a stash of money. A smile appeared on her face, but it lasted only a second. Voices suddenly echoed from downstairs. Then the front door opened. "Well, well," Hindley's voice rang through the house. "Look who's here." He smiled as he walked inside. "I told you, Rosen. I was feeling lucky today, didn't I?" The blood drained from both women's faces. "I knew you were up to something," Hindley continued calmly. "Perhaps I've been a little too soft on the two of you lately." He slowly rolled up his sleeves. "But today, I'll teach you both a lesson." Rosen's heart dropped. She immediately turned and ran outside to look for help. Not far away, she spotted two soldiers chatting while on patrol. She rushed toward them. "Please, please help us. My husband, he's beating her." She struggled to catch her breath. "One moment, lady," one of the soldiers said casually. "Calm down. So there's a fight at your house? Who exactly is he beating?" "Emily," Rosen answered hurriedly. "His daughter." The two soldiers exchanged glances before laughing. "Oh, come on. You made it sound like something serious. We don't interfere in family matters." The other soldier shrugged. "For all we know, maybe his daughter stole something. A man has to discipline his family from time to time." Rosen froze. Then anger surged through her. "What did you just say? How can you even say something like that?" The soldier's expression darkened. He suddenly grabbed her by the neck. "You're the noisy one," he sneered. "I bet your husband is already sick of you. A wife like this. No wonder the man's losing his mind." Then his gaze slowly wandered over her face. "But you're a pretty little thing." He lifted her chin with a grin. "So why don't we forget about your husband for a while? We could have a little fun, just the two of us." Rosen instantly understood what he meant. Without thinking, she bit down hard on his hand. The soldier cried out in pain. Rosen shoved him away and ran as fast as she could. As she raced back toward the house, a painful realization finally struck her. Now she understood why Emily had never run away. Even if they somehow managed to escape Hindley, there was no one else in this world willing to protect them. "You see now why I said I despised soldiers?" Rosen said in a low voice. For a long moment, Ian simply looked at her. Then he slowly reached out, gently caressing her cheek. "I'm sorry, Rosen." His thumb brushed away the tears gathering in her eyes. "I know it's far too late, but still, allow me to apologize on his behalf." Rosen lowered her gaze. "Why are you apologizing?" she asked sadly. "What is the point of that now?" Ian answered quietly. "As a fellow soldier, I'm apologizing." He met her eyes. "And I'm sorry I wasn't there back then." Rosen looked at him for a moment before slowly sitting upright. "If you had been there," she asked softly, "would things really have been different?" Ian didn't hesitate. "If they had been my subordinates." His expression hardened. "I would have shot them on the spot." Rosen stared at him in surprise. "But you hate killing people. Are you really saying you would have done that? For me?" Ian nodded without wavering. "I already have plenty of blood on my hands, Rosen. So what difference would a little more make at this point? And besides," his voice turned cold, "it's apparent they deserve to die." Rosen hesitated before asking another question. "Then, let's say you really had been there." She slowly reached forward, placing both hands on his shoulders as she leaned over him. Her eyes searched his. "Would you have killed Hindley Howers? For me?" Her voice trembled with pain. "Just tell me. You already know what I want to hear." The answer came immediately. "Of course." Ian looked straight into her eyes. "I'd have killed him, Rosen." The strength left Rosen's hands. She slowly collapsed into his arms. Emily had once told her that all hardships eventually resolve themselves in a single moment. And just now, Rosen had confirmed the sincerity of Ian's feelings. The balance between them had shifted. The scales were now in her favor. Ian had begun to trust her. But she would never waver. She would never trust him. She only had one goal left: to escape this ship. And before returning to Ian, she had already mixed the sleeping powder into both the wine and the water. Soon, Rosen drifted off to sleep as the night grew deeper. Ian remained sitting upright in his chair, a cigarette resting between his fingers. They were nearing the end of their journey. Once this ship reached its destination, his mission would be over. Yet there was one thing he was certain of. He could never let Rosen get off this ship and throw herself into the sea. That would only lead to a slow and painful death. Nor could he grant her the mercy of a quicker one. She was the one life he had managed to save from Rearton. There was no way he could watch her die now, and neither could he allow her to be sent to the Isle of Monte for a crime she hadn't committed. Ian ran a hand through his hair, his eyes drifting toward the small piece of cake sitting on the table beside him. It was ridiculous. Things had come to the point where even he found himself turning to a deity. A knock sounded at the door. Henry stepped inside. He looked from the sleeping Rosen to Ian before letting out a long sigh. "Look at you," he muttered. "I knew it. You have feelings for her, don't you?" Ian quietly took another drag from his cigarette, saying nothing. Henry frowned. "Come on, say something at least. I've had this horrible feeling for days. And the moment I saw you two kissing up on deck, I knew something was wrong." He rubbed his forehead in frustration. "The way you never leave her side. And you should see yourself. The way you look at her." His voice grew quieter, almost desperate. Then he suddenly stopped. Ian still hadn't denied it. Henry's grip tightened into a fist. "You're not even trying to deny it." He slowly sank to the floor, clutching his head. "Oh my God. Why? Why are you like this?" After a long silence, he looked back up. "How long?" Ian remained silent. That silence alone answered the question. Henry let out a bitter laugh. "So, it's been a while, hasn't it? But why? You're good at everything. You spent 10 years fighting that war, and now, when you've finally been given a chance to live your own life, you fall for a convict. And not just any convict, but the prisoner you're personally responsible for escorting." He covered his face with both hands. After a while, Henry slowly lowered his hands. "There was something I needed to ask." He looked Ian straight in the eyes. "Would you be able to kill her?" Ian froze. Without another word, Henry stood and slowly drew his pistol. He pointed it toward the sleeping Rosen. "What if I pulled the trigger right now? Could you bear it?" His finger rested against the trigger. "It would even be easier for her. Better than what awaits her on the Isle of Monte." Before he could finish, Ian grabbed Henry by the collar. The pistol clattered onto the floor. Henry's back slammed against the wall. "So," Henry said quietly, "you can't do it." Ian's grip slowly loosened. He stepped back without saying a word. Henry sighed hard. "What are we supposed to do now?" Ian looked at him. "Henry, just tell me, why are you really here? What's happening outside?" Henry's expression immediately turned serious. "We're surrounded by sea monsters. The ship has come to a complete standstill. Father says he's never seen anything like this in over 40 years at sea." He hesitated. "And that's not all. They're going crazy up there. They're looking for Rosen." Ian's eyes narrowed. "What do they want with her?" Henry looked down. "They're saying it's witchcraft. They think Rosen used magic to stop the ship. They're ready to drag her out." Ian quietly listened before giving his order. "Henry, cover her with something and take her back to her cell. That's the safest place for her right now. I'll deal with the crowd and the captain." Henry nodded. He carefully lifted the sleeping Rosen into his arms. "Be careful, Sir Connor," he said quietly before leaving the cabin. Once the door closed, Ian picked up his military jacket and changed back into his uniform. If the people needed a witch to blame, then it was time for the hero to appear. Once again, he would have to play the role of the Empire's beloved hero, so that every eye would turn toward him instead of Rosen. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.